Okay, hello and welcome back. We are hopefully finishing up the epilogue for Baxter's DLC. Um, we spent the last couple weeks getting ready for this wedding, and the wedding is finally here. So hopefully we can get through it all. But I don't know for sure because, of course, I haven't played this before. I haven't pre-watched. So, obviously, my assumption is that things are gonna work out and we'll get to actually be with Baxter. But how that comes about remains to be seen. But we have been getting closer. Baxter has been losing his distance, has been just spending time with him has kind of eroded that distance he was trying to keep between us, and we're kind of been clearing the air, kind of getting an idea of what's been going on in his head and why he's made the decisions that he has and all of that. So hopefully we can make things work out. So Terry has just picked us up to take us to the venue for the wedding, and we spent the night at Baxter's apartment because he offered to bake a groom's cake because for reasons, and of course we helped out because of course. So there's been lots of callbacks to the moments with Baxter in step 3, and it's been really fun to spot those. So here we go. Alright. You did as instructed, climbing into the cab and buckling yourself in. Terry rammed the van into gear and pulled off, wasting no time and heading back the way he'd come. He wheel animatedly. Yeah, so Terry's picked us up from the groom's house. It's finally here. The big one. I'm ready for it. You're gonna steal the show for sure.
Very nifty.
It's cool to dress sharp sometimes, huh? Maybe to some people this is stuffy nonsense. I think that way about a ton of formal things for sure, but it's not always like that. Better real classy, cause Randy can't help it. She looks good without even trying. That's cause you're in love with her. Would be held on an upper floor of one of the many skyscrapers that dominated the urban sprawl. Yeah, I don't know if people remember or if you've even seen the beginning of the epilogue, but seeing Baxter again was a real surprise, and you have the option of calling Cove or Liz to tell them about it. And if you, depending on which one you do call, you can call the other one afterwards, or you could call neither of them. But what's the point in that? Jerry parked in the lot under the shadow of the high-rise, and after an extended elevator ride, the doors opened. You stepped into a spacious room flooded with sunlight. I don't think I've ever been in a skyscraper like this. I mean, I've been in tall buildings, but not like skyscrapers.
So,
And here we are. Impressive, isn't it? They know how to pick a place. Yeah. Let's just appreciate Terry's look for the moment. I don't know if this is all the most dressed up he's gonna be, or if he's going to add, like, button up his vest and add a tie or jacket and stuff. But it still looks pretty good. They couldn't help but agree. The wedding hall, which was basically an entire floor of the building, boasted floor-to-ceiling windows. The effect was dizzying. The whole city was at your feet. You weren't able to admire the view for long, however. The place was in a frenzy of preparation. No sooner had you arrived than you were being swept up in it. Baxter made a beeline for you the moment he heard the elevator doors open, his wedding planner persona firmly in place.
Nice
excellent.
to see you.
It's good to see you both. Excuse the brevity, but as you can see, we're well underway with setting out the centerpieces already. You exchanged a brief nod of acknowledgement before it gestured for you and Terry to join Miranda, hard at work by a table at the far end of the hall. Yeah! She's so pretty. I mean, I said before that I wish I could romance her. But, you know, Terry gets priority. She was wearing a simple yet elegant pink dress, and her long hair floated in rivulets of immaculately arranged curls. Terry called out to her in greeting, and she turned and waved you over, beaming. Great, you're here. You look lovely, Jules. You made it back to Jude and Scott's without any trouble, I guess. She huddled in closer, gave a furtive look around the room, as if her brother's fiancé might be in earshot by some freak accident.
Thank you.
Baxter filled us in on your alibi. Thank you so much for making an extra cake. I know Jude was beating himself up over that. She pointed to a table a short distance away. An unassuming white platter and cover rested there, a gift from one groom to another, courtesy of Jules and Baxter's bakery. Yeah, it looks pretty great. Scott's gonna love it, for sure. I sure hope so. They both will. Now let's get to it. Terry let out a startled grunt as Miranda dumped a box of guest favors into his arms before picking up another two of her own. Sorry, we don't have time to stand around. Jules, would you grab that last box over there? We need to take them to... A hectic afternoon of busy work ensued. Everyone had been saying it, but this was something you only ever truly understood in the thick of it. There was so much to do. Tables to decorate, seating plans to consult, name cards to sort, rows of chairs to sit up, garlands to hang, and ribbons to tie, and candles to place into candlesticks. Miranda's parents were sitting at one of the dining tables, dressed in a matching suit and dress, folding napkins like their lives depended on it. They'd clearly been practicing. It was funny, you thought, while unpacking the centerpieces, to see so many people whizzing about in formal clothing. You wondered if this was what butlers felt like all the time. The eye of the storm was Baxter, coordinating the efforts with poise and expertise beyond his years. The tension only served to make him sharper, more focused in his pursuit of perfection. He was the common nexus to all your efforts, the axle around which the room revolved, faster and faster. You suppose this was just another kind of dance to him? True. It felt impossible to keep track of everything that was happening. You blinked and then Xavier was there, delivering the confectionery masterpiece in its grandeur. It joined the concealed groom's cake on the dessert table. You happened to catch a glimpse. I think that should be A, not a glimpse of Xavier sneaking a peek under the lid. It looked like they approved. Maybe. There was, surprise, surprise, not a spare minute to stop and chat with them directly. They had a business to get back to, and you were also otherwise occupied. Yeah, I remember on Great British Bake Off, one of the contestants said they made a cake for a wedding, but they didn't stick around to find out if anybody liked it. They left. I'm like, I suppose that makes sense. So occupied, in fact, that several hours passed without you realizing it.
Huh?
That better be the last one. I'm never straightening another place setting for the rest of my life. Terry slumped into a chair, making a big show of looking short of breath. Miranda plopped herself down in the chair next to him and gave him a playful stab in the ribs with her elbow. Which, granted, there's not a lot of reasons you'd need to do that again. Aw, you could have let me milk the drama for a bit. Sorry again. It's too late now. You solved it. We should... Hey, you okay? Terry put a hand on Miranda's shoulder, concerned. She had begun massaging the backs of her ankles, wincing a little.
It'll be okay.
I'm alright. It's these shoes. Don't know why I thought it was a good idea to prepare the venue in this new pair when I could have worn my regular sandals and swapped them out before the guests arrived. Sorry, at least there's not a lot of reasons you'd need to decorate a wedding in pumps again? Yeah, you solved it. They're so cute. Miranda startled at a loud clapping that rang through the hall. Baxter was standing at the far end, his hands together. The room quickly fell silent.
Bravo.
If I could have your attention, everyone, I think I'm right in saying that we've now completed the necessary preparations for the main event. You performed an admirable job. From this point on, the wedding should proceed without any further difficulty, so I'd like to invite you to enjoy this special occasion starting now. You've earned it. With that said, received word from the receptionist that the guests have begun to congregate in the foyer downstairs. You only need to join them to wait for the grooms to make their arrival. Thank you. You shared a look with Terry and Miranda before the three of you, with no small amount of effort, got on your feet. You headed for the elevator as Baxter came alongside. The attention was off of him for the moment, and he'd eased into a more casual posture, with one hand in his pocket. Very suave, he addressed you each in turn. Terry, Miranda, Jules, good work, each of you.
Thank you.
In my capacity as an organizer, I wouldn't normally say this, but it's been a relief to be able to count on you today. This whole week, in fact. Don't say that. It's the least I could do for Jude, even in spite of his, lack of forethought. She sighed. I feel bad you weren't seeing my brother at his best all the time. I love him, but sometimes his head is completely up his own ass. Yes. I get that, Miranda. I get that. Baxter's cool countenance gave way to a sudden snort, which he tried and failed to cover up with his hand. He'd never anticipated Miranda, of all people, to be the one to say such a thing. I have a big brother, and I love him dearly, but sometimes he drives me crazy. And then other times he does something really super sweet and nice, and it's like, how can I... It's just a sibling thing. It was rare, but she knew how to choose her moments carefully. It was always a bit of a treat. Terry gave a dramatic gasp of indignation and rounded on her with false astonishment.
Yeah.
You can't say ass at a wedding? Miranda only grinned up at her boyfriend, innocent as an angel. It's a good thing for both of us that the wedding hasn't started yet. It was no good trying to keep a straight face. Both you and Baxter exchanged helpless glances before joining in the laughter wholeheartedly. It had been a tiring few days. You were feeling it, now more than ever. But you'd made it through with a little help from your friends, and no small amount of silliness. Baxter cleared his throat, regaining his composure to the best of his ability.
So...
That being said, we should get to our butts downstairs. After you, Jules. He piled into the elevator and made the ride down to the lobby, prickly with anticipation as the floor number grew closer and closer to 1. The double doors opened to bustling energy. A thronging host of guests were lingering about, chattering excitedly amongst themselves. Baxter gave a proper tip of his head and darted off into the crowd, ostensibly to take care of arrangements for when the couple arrived. Terry and Miranda followed not far behind. You stayed put while they went round to give welcomes. Unlike you, they knew a fair number of the people in attendance. Still, there was one ever-familiar face in the crowd. Cove! Towering impressively over almost everyone else, yet standing awkwardly off to one side, was a man with a gentle face and hair the color of sea glass. I like that shirt. That's cool. We're gonna rush over to him. Darted into the crowd, making for Cove like he was your lighthouse in a storm. The waves parted, and soon enough you were skidding to a halt, almost crashing right into him. Cove had spotted the movement out of the corner of his eye and lifted his arms as if to steady you.
Oh,
Jules! Big hug. Cove had many good qualities, but being premium hug material was absolutely one of the better ones. He made a small sound before his arms wrapped around you instinctively. When you drew apart again, Cove was regarding you with fondness. Hi, Cove. Hey, Jules. I missed you. His tenor was soft, full of sincerity. It tugged at your heartstrings to hear it in person again. I mean, I know it's only been not even a week, but that's okay. I missed you too. It was the kind of sensation that you only truly recognized the instant you gave voice to it. But it's the truth. You'd been missing Cove all the way through this ordeal. At hearing his feelings echoed back at him, Cove positively beamed. You basked in the shared sentiment for a while, not really speaking, content to simply be together.
so...
How did it go with the preparation and stuff? With, Baxter, the wedding planning? There's a faint upward lilt to the way he said Baxter's name, kind of like he was unsure if he remembered it correctly, though of course that wasn't really the reason. COVID found it just as hard as the rest of you to believe that your old acquaintance had reappeared. He was still not yet accustomed to including the name in his vocabulary. Oh boy. Oh boy. Again. Or... Let's go with this one. I don't even know where to begin. Cove's eyebrows drew up in a face of mild concern. That intense, huh? Your reunion was cut short by a sudden shift in the surrounding ambiance. The constant hubbub was rising in intensity, reaching a fever pitch. Something was happening. All around you, people were trying to face the entrance, craning their necks and peering around each other to get a better look. Through the glass doors, you made out a familiar splash of scarlet. There were several appreciative whispers from the congregation. A low whistle came from somewhere nearby, and you overheard a guest announce to his neighbor that the car was a Corvette. Baxter was at the head of the assembly, ready and waiting to throw open the doors. Two men exited the stylish riot dress in even more fashionable suits. The grooms had arrived. Just take a moment to appreciate their outfits. Matching and yet complementary. Not quite matching, but complimentary is what I'm trying to say. You look good. You'd peeked at the photographs from their shopping spree, so you'd known what to expect, but there's always something different about seeing it in person. That's I watched Soas on YouTube, and their complaint about pictures of clothes, and pretty much it's hard to get a feel for the clothes when they're just on a mannequin. They're meant to be worn by someone living and breathing. And so pictures and mannequins will never really do clothes justice. You need to see them in motion. When Scott and Jude entered the building, the crowd parted, forming a corridor to let them pass. They would be leading the way back up to the hall from here. The crowd was shepherded into the elevators and stages, heading back up top. Baxter stayed hard at work, directing the incoming traffic and ensuring that everyone promptly found a seat. You and Cove had arrived early and snagged a row of four somewhere near the front. Terry and Miranda appeared after. Soon the elevator's doors closed for the last time, and the final few stragglers eased into place. The betrothed were behind everyone, waiting patiently. All at once, like everyone could sense it, a hush fell over the crowd. Peering over your shoulder, you saw Baxter give a curt nod to the officiant before fiddling with a miniature remote. From hidden speakers, you heard the opening bars of music you couldn't place, something measured yet upbeat, and every head in the room swiveled to watch Scott and Jude walk down the aisle. They were bound for an elegant archway that had been erected right beside one of the enormous bedrooms. The afternoon sunshine haloed them with gold. The music fell silent. All was still. Yeah, one of my cousins, I got to attend her wedding, and both her parents gave her away. Usually it's the dad, but in her case, she wanted both her parents to give her away. I think my aunt and uncle are divorced now. I can't remember for sure anymore because they live over in Alabama and I'm in California. So, anywho, yeah, I like this. It's personal preference. Music fell silent, all was still. The last 5 days of your lives had been a whirlwind, a long, stressful journey towards this singular moment. Two men in front of you and saw none of that. Here at last was the magic to the ritual. They were two figures, radiant, bathed in sunlight. They stood hand in hand with the whole world beneath them and had eyes only for each other. Yeah. Right together. The ceremony itself was brief, with no unnecessary pomp and circumstance, but suffused throughout with sweetness. The officiant gave a welcome before proceeding with opening words on the subject of commitment, of family, and of love. Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today. The exchange of vows and rings immediately followed, promises to be there for one another in good times and in bad. Scott went first, reading his vows from a little card. Jude did his from memory, his voice trembling with emotion. He tried to focus on every word, but became a little distracted by your friends. Of course. 2 seats down from you, Miranda was wordlessly dealing out Kleenex while Terry and Cove, who on cue had begun to weep. She then dabbed at her own face, teary-eyed herself. Of course, it's her brother getting married. Look at their blushes! Thereafter came the candle lighting ceremony, a moment of quiet intimacy, save for the odd sniffle. The grooms each lit their own smaller tapers separately before igniting the large unity candle together. I've heard of that before. I don't know if I've actually attended a wedding where that was a thing. I haven't actually been to many weddings. One by one, you watched as their hopes for the day were realized. Baxter had been right. The whole thing went off without so much as a hitch. Well, besides the people getting hitched, of course. I like that. It went so smoothly, in fact, that was nearly over in no time at all. There was one final matter to take care of. The broad smile and a booming voice, the officiant pronounced the marriage completed. You may now— Oh! There wasn't any point in finishing. The crowd had erupted in cheers before they could get that far. Scott's restraint had held up right until the final moment, but being forced to wait any longer to kiss his husband was a bridge too far. He jumped the gun and juked, but it wasn't like it mattered. The hall filled with the sound of laughter, and a huge clattering went up as the whole congregation got noisily to their feet. That's sweet. It's not like it's the first time the husband or wife has jumped the gun. The newly wedded Mr. and Mr. Adam turned to face the crowd of their family and friends, eyes bright, heads held high. They stood and waved before blinking arms and striding back up the aisle. They shook hands and smiled with all and sundry, leading a growing procession over to the far end of the hall where the reception tables were laid out, waiting. Just like that, the ceremony was over and it was time to start the party. As the guests began to migrate, the staff hung back, already beginning to rearrange the space. Chairs were being stacked and wheeled over to the reception area, ready for dinner.
Take care.
Go ahead and enjoy. I'll take care of things here. Baxter excused himself to assist with the preparation, disappearing into the crowd and leaving you, Miranda, Cove, and Terry to mingle with the other guests. No sooner had you lost sight of him than you spotted the men of the hour wading through the mass of guests, hands clasped triumphantly between them. The progress was rather slow. Everyone and their mom wanted a handshake. Eventually, they made it over to where your little group was standing. Scott was bouncing on the balls of his feet, lighter than air. Jude was his usual grounded self, but you could tell he was ecstatic. Raised his hand in a casual wave. Yo! Hey guys! We're gonna hug him! Whoa! Jude's arms came up to steady you as you barreled into him. On your other side, Scott giggled. Congratulations on your marriage. Scott's radiant expression could have clouded all of California for a year.
Thank you so much.
It's been hard to keep myself together. I'm just so... He scrunched up his face and squeezed his arms in tight, as if to clamp down on the powerful, nameless emotion welling up inside him. You understood, even if he couldn't find the word for it. Jude, with one arm still entwined with Scott's, reached over with his free hand and tapped you on the shoulder. Hey, this wouldn't have been the same without you.
I appreciate this.
You could say that again. Thank you so much for your help, Jules. Take some time to relax and enjoy the reception, okay?
You earned it.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure. And thanks. The pair of them grinned in unison before once more being swept up in the tide of well-wishers and distant relations. For an instant, you were left twiddling your thumbs along with the others. You took a moment to survey your surroundings for lack of anything better to do. In a far corner of the room, you spotted a conspicuous figure flitting about, a grim-faced lady holding a camera. You recognized her easily. She'd been at every single Eckert family event for the last decade or more, dutifully documenting the event for posterity. You know, every family has that one person who takes pictures, right? You would have put money on her having been there when Miranda and Jude were born, in fact. It was hard to imagine her missing any significant occasion. You were relieved she could make it. Eventually, Scott and Jude had hugged, kissed, or shaken hands with the majority of their guests. Meanwhile, the staff were beginning to clear a large empty space in the middle of the room, easing the crowd to the walls to uncover the central floor. With cautious steps, Scott and Jude made their way onto the dance floor, 2 lone figures. They took their positions as the noise of the guests faded to silence. He saw Jude leaning close to his husband, whispering something in his ear. Scott grinned, their eyes met, and the music played. It started off slow with a measured, even tempo. The couple began to move in unison, easing into the dance carefully, their toes testing the floor as one might the surface of a frozen pond. As the beat began to pick up, though, they quickly settled into a polished, practiced routine. To your left, Terry sucked in an impressed gasp. He wasn't the only one to give his approval. As the couple spun steadily around the space, there were encouraging whoops and smatterings of applause. You could hardly believe those were the same people who, only a few days prior, would have sworn on their own lives that this was an impossible feat. And now they were taking turns dipping each other to cheers, barely able to contain their joy. From across the room, you noticed Baxter watching with a gentle, heartfelt expression on his face. You detected a hint of satisfaction. He was unabashedly proud of his students. Of course he is! His eyes flicked aside to meet yours, although that might have been a trick of the light, the setting sun casting strange shadows. Either way, his features remained unaltered, tender. As the music came to a delicate finish, Scott and June maintained their final pose for a second or two before embracing, to more acclaim from the onlookers. Scott held Jude's head in both hands, leaning in for a kiss, extra cheering from Terry. Cove averted his eyes a little bashfully. He'd always been the type to get flustered over PDA. I mean, I don't blame him. But this is a wedding. They just got married. The lovers took their vows and were then rushed off to take more photos. Now that the first dance was taken care of, the next order of business was arguably the most important. Food! Terry's voice was easily audible over the growing din of guests milling around once more. In an instant he was gone, vanished in the direction of the appetizers. There was a green blur at the edge of your peripheral vision. He looked over to find Cove, or rather the empty spot where he had been standing mere moments ago. Yep. Cove is a bottomless pit. Nothing was more reliable than Cove's response to what Miranda had once dubbed the F-bomb. That boy must have hollow legs. Maybe that was what made him so buoyant. You exchanged amused glances with Randy before she shrugged and followed along behind the two boys. May as well get some food too. It was going to be a close call if you knew your friends. There had been a hungry look in Terry's eyes as he dashed past. He gravitated in the direction of the snack table, following along in the wake of your friends. Most of the other congregants were taking this opportunity for more socializing, with some handfuls breaking away to grab a morsel to munch on while they waited. No telling how long it's going to be until the meal itself is ready. It was easy to hook back up with your friends nearby. Though, admittedly, that was never difficult at the worst of times. You just had to walk in the direction of an elevated pair of blue eyes, right? Cove's frickin' tall. As soon as you caught up to them, Cove was passing you a small delicacy of some description.
Hey,
You should really try this. It's good. Thanks. You took whatever it was and popped it in your mouth, giving a thumbs up of appreciation. He'd been right. You immediately leaned over the table and grabbed another. So good. The four of you hung around by the hors d'oeuvres for a while, swapping stories and reminiscing about the places you'd seen some of the other guests. Terry was, with some small degree of pride, recounting the names of Miranda's relatives as they flitted in and out of view. Many of them stopped by to say hello, which was sweet to watch. It's evident that many of Miranda's family already considered Terry to be one of their own, and it didn't escape your nose that Randy was on the receiving end of several meaningful looks. Randy, for her part, was doing an exceptional job of pretending not to notice any of them. She could be very unflappable when the situation demanded. So she blushes and is shy, but occasionally she has her moments where she's like, nope. Before you and your friends could totally wipe out the snack table, there was a tinkling sound of a bell being rung, which came from the direction of the dining area. This was the signal for everyone to take their places for the main course, presumably. Your little group hurried on over, joining the mass of guests crowded around the table. Everyone's designated seat was marked with a name card, written in flowing golden ink. You spotted yours quickly. You and your friends were near the head table. Of course. I mean, Terry, Miranda, and you were instrumental in getting this thing sorted. Once the momentary fuss of the seating arrangements was dispensed with, the meal followed along in very short order. A small squadron of waitstaff began to set large plates in front of the guests, each laden with food, giving off a faint wisp of steam. If Memory served, the options were chicken tagine, beef steak, vegetarian ravioli, and a vegan risotto. In actuality, you had paid very little attention to the main course, your mind being elsewhere. The main was naturally a precursor to what Cove would have described as the most important course of all, dessert. On this occasion, you had to agree with him. You wolfed down your meal with a sense of growing excitement, hardly able to stop yourself from peeking over to the top table every now and again. The tiered wedding cake, Xavier's masterpiece, stood resplendent at one end of Jude and Scott's table, and next to it, hidden under an unassuming silver cloche. How would it be received? What would Scott think? In your anticipation, you were finding it hard to sit still. You didn't skip Cove's notice that something was up. Halfway through eating, there was a gentle nudge at your elbow. He was looking at you quizzically.
Are you okay?
He was genuinely concerned, which was both very sweet and rather funny. Flashed him a quick smile and waved it away, not wanting to risk being overheard. During the ceremony and throughout the meal, Baxter flitted from corner to corner of the room with the delicacy of a honeybee, his presence unassuming and unnoticed by all present, except you. Of course we're keenly aware of Baxter. Hello. As the main course was being cleared, however, he tapped a fork against the side of a wine glass, a clear sound reverberating up the tiled floors and quieting the diner's discussions. Honored guests, I hope the food and drink has been to your satisfaction. There are some non-specific noises of concurrence from the various tables. He glanced at Terry, who's patting his stomach contentedly, then at Miranda, still nibbling away at a piece of bread.
Glad to hear it.
We've come to the part of the evening where the newlyweds will cut the traditional first slices of their wedding cake. Scott, Jude, if you'd like to. The sound of 2 chairs scraped against the floor drowned out the rest of what he said. Scott and Jude got to their feet and came around from behind the top table. The 2 men stood shoulder to shoulder in front of the tiered cake. A large steel knife clutched in Scott's right hand. Jude's left rested over the top, his wedding band winking in the candlelight. I like that little detail. It's so cute. There's a momentary pause as the dour-faced photographer performed her solemn, at least to her, duty, and then with relatively little actual ceremony, the first clean cuts were made. The couple apportioned a slice apiece, and as promised, there was no smushing of cake into anyone's face. A round of applause rippled around the tables as the first bites were taken, and then a bustling sound as people started getting up to form a queue. Scott was limbering up to carve slices for everybody when Jude tugged at his sleeve and stopped him with a word. He gestured to the silver cover, still hiding whatever was underneath. Sensing that there was more to come, the guests piped out again. When Scott reached over and finally lifted the top to reveal the groom's cake in all its glory, there were several soft gasps. One of these was from Scott himself, whose face was blown wide with surprise and delight. He smiled, open-mouthed, looking silently to his husband and back down at the controller cake. Not the best, but it works. It got the job done. You feel a warm, fuzzy feeling spread throughout your body as Scott began to whisper rapidly in Jude's ear, likely interrogating him about what was going on and where the cake had come from. It was too far away for you to tell what was said, but you didn't need to be in earshot to know that Scott was floored. You sagged in your seat with relief, your long night's effort vindicated. Yes! News of the groom's cake spread like a wave through the room, people murmuring excitedly to one another with some approving nods and expressions of admiration thrown in. At his husband's side, Jude was
Seriously.
some laughter, and then the room devolved into chatter as people began lining up in front of the top table. Friends being close by got there early. The couple were handing slices to everyone on little side plates. Jude took care of the even as he cut into it. At the front of the line, you had the option of taking a slice from the chocolate vanilla cake, the carrot cake of your own making, or, to Cove's delight, a piece of both. You went for both, obviously. Serve Cove, the grooms both laughed to hear you also ask for 2 slices. What could you say? You wanted to have your cake and eat it. Twice. Cove grinned at you as you both returned to the table with a plate in each hand, 4 helpings between you.
Right.
Why make a hard choice when you don't have to, right? I mean, for the chocolate and vanilla because I'm very traditional, but I helped make the cake. I want a piece of it. Right. When everyone was in their seats again, you had an unexpected visitor. Baxter had squeezed his way past the line for dessert and over to your table. His hand hovered at the back of your chair. Sup? Hi. Hey. Co's greeting was stilted and awkward. There simply hadn't been time before for him to get used to Baxter's presence. He was never quite used to it to begin with.
Hello.
It's been a while, Co. Good evening, everyone. Are we enjoying ourselves? Your group exchanged glances amongst themselves as if to decide who would go first. It's nice. Co swallowed his mouthful of cake and tried again.
It's nice.
It's been pretty nice, yeah. Miranda threw up her hands in mock exasperation, her body language having become a lot more flamboyant ever since the wine she'd had with the main course. Someone's a little tipsy. Don't worry, Baxter. I think it's the best wedding I've ever been to. Terry nodded along as she spoke, tilting his chair up on its hind legs with his arm draped over the back of it. It's been amazing. You brought your A game today, B-man. Baxter's eyes twinkled at the mention of his old moniker, and it looked like the professional here was suppressing a laugh to boot. I'm afraid the joke gets a C-, Terry. Hey, but no, seriously, man, it's been a blast. That's what, 2 successful events you've organized for Miranda's family already? You should become the official party planner for the Eckerts.
Yeah.
That could work. At least I know who to come to when Terry and I, need help. Exactly. Wait a minute. The front legs of Terry's chair hit the floor with a thud. As Miranda waited for her boyfriend's brain to catch up with conversation, she reached for her glass and took another swig of wine. I thought you weren't going to propose, Miranda. Terry looked like he was trying to solve an extremely difficult mental math problem, all power of language having evaporated. Miranda simply patted his leg, looked into his eyes, and smiled sweetly. She let out a silent shout in her head, not wanting to interrupt whatever moment the two were now having. Miranda hadn't proposed at her brother's wedding, but it was a heck of a hint. Baxter put a finger thoughtfully to his lips, trying to hide the way the corners of his mouth were curling upwards. Perhaps I could consider introducing a loyalty card system. I certainly appreciate a returning customer. Miranda had now laced her fingers together with Terry's, who was still unresponsive to external stimuli. Co giggled and leaned in to speak quietly to you. I wasn't here for a week. What happened? A lot. Seriously. You didn't get a chance to elaborate. Baxter, Jules, I was looking for you. I know what you did. Scott had a healthy flush to his face, his eyes bright and enthusiastic. It didn't match the almost sinister choice of words. Jude appeared at his husband's right elbow. You made that cake?
Yep.
Last night. Scott's eyebrows and voice rose in unison, his tone modulating a few octaves upwards in incredulousness.
What?
Last night? You can't be serious. What were you thinking? You and Baxter nearly fell over trying to assure Scott that it hadn't been too much trouble, that you'd volunteered your time, and besides, you're both old hands at baking by now. Out of the corner of your eye, you noticed Code paying attention, a look of comprehension dawning on his face. The source of your earlier agitation had finally been revealed. With enough reassurance from the pair of you, Scott's concern was mollified enough for him to round his way back to thanking you again. It was the highlight of the day, honestly.
That's wonderful.
You're too kind, Scott. It's been more than worthwhile. As long as you're satisfied, I couldn't be happier. Yeah, you're welcome, Mr. and Mr. Adam. Thanks, it was just perfect. The cake, the ceremony. His voice was getting strained with emotion, and he broke off in favor of taking Jude's hand again. We won't forget it. Right, Grant? A bigger shake of the head from Grant. Cool. Well, here, Jude reached over and clapped a hand to Baxter's shoulder.
We owe you.
For real, you made this happen. Thank you. Thank you all. There's another round of your welcomes, and don't mention this before Baxter made his excuses and promptly vanished. Jude watched him leave, arms folded.
I'm sorry.
Hey, Jules, it's been a rough week with everything between you and him. You put it aside and got things done for sure. But I'm sorry. It was big of you to hang in there. It doesn't matter now. If anything, I'm glad it went like this. Looking on the bright side, huh? Jude gave his wedding reception a glance with new eyes. We should go. The real dance he started, and he owes me a rematch. Scott tutted, cocking his hip. It's not going to make any difference, Jude, but I'll humor you since it's your wedding day. It's your wedding day, too. Those two had made a game A competitive one at that, even out of dancing together. No one could get in the way of that. The couple joyfully made a break for the dance floor, hand in hand. After a second or so, Miranda wiped a few chocolate cake crumbs from around her mouth and got to her feet, holding out her hand to Terry.
So,
You know, we could dance too. Terry placed his palm on top of Miranda's and sprang out of his seat. Yes, let's show those clowns what 10 years of birthday parties looks like. How about you, Cove? The pair of them turned to their puppy dog eyes over to Cove, who was somehow still chewing, shook his head and swallowed.
Don't worry about
I'm
it.
good. I'll stay here and watch, if that's okay. Sure. Jules? Don't want to join them. I think it's time for a dice. I don't think I rolled any dice last time. I know there's a D4 in here. I don't need a D8. I mean, that would work. Here we go. D4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. You shook your head. That'd be too much. Okay, cheer us on! They ran off to join the center of the space, leaving you and Cove to chill. You slouched in your seat, letting the chair take all your weight as you performed a full-body sag. It's times like those when you are grateful that someone, somewhere, had invented the age-old art of sitting down. Across the room, you watched Terry and Miranda approach the grooms as the initial riff of a modern club hit started to play in the background. Even from your vantage point, it became apparent that Scott was still very much out of his element when it came to dancing. Baxter's tutelage could only get him so far, and besides, that had been a totally different style and genre. Yup. Meanwhile, Terry and Miranda and Jude had been to enough parties and to clubs over the years that they had some tricks up their pant legs and skirt bottom. Your two friends shimmied about the room with abandon, and Scott and Jude canoodled to a slow blues number. Whoever chose the music had obviously known their audience. In this glass palace on top of the world, people celebrated the evening away. A few early stars, like curious children, began to poke their heads out. The time moved for you in strange increments, moments and colors running together like globs of paint. Counted the minutes by the measure of jazz chords and camera flashes and laughter. You remembered looking around for him at times, trying to catch a glimpse through the shifting mass of bodies, eyes peeled for that telltale mop of grayish black. But try as you did, Baxter Ward was visible only in short snatches. The back of his head over someone's shoulder, half of his turned to speak to a colleague, a pair of eyes reflected in a window. His presence was like a wisp of insubstantial smoke. He had become a shadow, easily forgotten, yet always there. Hours passed until you were standing in the lobby with the others to send the couple off. It was funny, you thought. For the days of effort you put in, it was all over so quickly. Scott and Jude were doing the rounds one last time, expressing their heartfelt appreciation to people for coming. They hadn't stopped holding hands since the dancing began. I don't blame them. A few moments later, and you were waving from the front steps as they got in the sparkling car and drove off. The splash of red sped away in an instant, carrying them to a new life together. The majority of the guests made themselves scarce shortly afterwards, heading down to the parking garage en masse or getting into taxis. You stayed behind together with Scott and Jude's relations. The party portion of the party might have finished, but someone had to clean up afterwards. You leaned against the wall of the elevator on the way back up to the hall, half tired, half relieved. So we've gone up once, down once, up twice, down twice, up a third time, and then we're gonna have to go back down a third time. One good thing about the event being over was that you didn't have to worry about it anymore. The doors opened once again and you stepped out into the wedding hall. Cove, Miranda, and Terry were at the dining tables, busily stripping them down.
Hey!
Over here! You beckoned to join them, and soon you were scooping up garbage and folding tablecloths in earnest. It was almost a cliche at this point, but you once again found yourself recalling a similar occasion years before, just like when you stayed behind to clear up after Miranda's birthday party. It had felt the same way then, the strange mix of emptiness and satisfaction. Casting your eyes about the room, you realized that wasn't the only common thread. Like before, there was one member of your ragtag group who wasn't present. Baxter was down on the opposite end of the room, still rushing to and fro between various groups of staff, keeping himself occupied. He decided not to get in his way, not while he was busy. The moment would come eventually. You needed to talk now that the big event was done with. You resigned yourself to waiting. The trouble was, it took a lot longer than you'd anticipated. Once all the trash had been cleared away, he had started vacuuming the floors. How did he find that? And then when he finished with the decorations, he sent Millie stacks of chairs over to the elevators. He passed close by as you were beginning to pack the wedding cakes. You called out to him, but all that got you was a precautionary smile and a tilt of the head before he sped away again. Is he deliberately avoiding me? Your heart sank as you turned back to what was left of the groom's cake, which you were slicing to pack into a storage container. He hadn't spoken to you since that one time during the reception. It couldn't be a coincidence. For some reason or another, he'd been avoiding all of you. Or maybe you specifically. It was getting kind of ridiculous. There's almost nobody left in the room right now. It was you, Cove, Miranda, and Terry, some employees from the building itself, and Baxter. Everyone else had gone. Time was running out. If you left before you'd had a chance to speak, there was no knowing whether you'd get another. You might never see him again. You looked down at the cake that you made, the last evidence of your collaboration, maybe even your friendship, and you were cutting it to pieces and putting it away in a box. How symbolic. You wouldn't be put through the same thing again. You wouldn't. Slumped in your seat, no longer able to stave off the melancholic feeling in your gut, a dull throb of old pain. Was it always going to be this way? Ache a break? The sound of Miranda's voice pulled you out of your mental quagmire. You'd been so focused on Baxter's usual strangeness that you hadn't registered her talking. One look at the surprise on your face was enough for Randy to know you had been a million miles away. She tapped the table in front of you. I can finish up here, Jules. You've been going for ages, and you were up all night, too. Her wide eyes were worried when you looked up into them, and there was a slight pinch in her forehead. Yeah, you should take it easy. Terry's head popped into view from behind Miranda, his expression of concern an exact replica of hers. So cute, the way they had gradually taken on each other's mannerisms over the years. Leave something for Cove to do for once. He's got to earn that 5th slice of cake. There was a yelp of indignation as, last but not least, Cove made his appearance over Terry's shoulder. The sight of the three of them lined up in height order like that was comical. I mean, look at how tall Cove is! Come on! Cove's face was a little pouty, his tone defensive. It wasn't like I didn't want to help out Terry, and besides, it wouldn't be my 5th, it would be, let's see... Trailed off, his gaze drifting up and to one side as he silently counted on his fingers. As a unit, Terry and Miranda rolled their eyes. Seeming to realize his mistake, Cove dropped his hands. Anyway, they're right about the break, Jules. You can leave the rest to me, okay? Oh? At this, Miranda pulled up a chair next to yours and sat down.
Wow.
Leave it all to you, Cove? That's so nice! Huh? Wow, thanks for offering, buddy. It's been such a long day after all. Terry stretched wide and made a ridiculously exaggerated yawning sound before plopping down onto Miranda's lap and putting an arm around her shoulder. They both grinned at Cove with all their teeth. I love it.
Hey!
I didn't mean that! Stifling a laugh, you got up to leave. Your friends were probably right. You need to give the wedding work a break. You had other things on your mind anyway. You nodded at Cove sympathetically as you headed for the far end of the wedding hall, in the direction of a certain someone. For the past half hour or so, Baxter had visibly struggled to stay preoccupied. Almost nobody remained for him to give instructions to. There were no more chairs to stack or tables to clear. By now, he'd resorted to standing with his back turned and his arms folded, gazing out over the city through the enormous windows and trying his best to look deep in thought. You weren't fooled, though. It was about time you put him out of his misery. You approached from behind and softly called his name. Baxter? He stiffened at the sound, shoulders tensing. For a few seconds, he was frozen. Then, all at once, Baxter spun around to face you, that perennial smile fixed firmly in place. Good evening again, Jules. Is everything alright with the cleanup? It's going fine. The others are handling the last couple things. You cleared your throat, shuffling a little on your feet. You'd been mulling over a plan of attack, so to speak, but now that came down to it, you weren't convinced it was going to work. I don't know if you remember, but I promised once that I'd give you a call the next time there's a wedding going on, and, well, here we are. Baxter's eyes widened a fraction at this, and his mouth gradually fell open. I see. It's good everything is in hand with respect to tidying up. You've been a great help. That didn't bode well. Baxter's as amicable as ever, but his body language closed off, his tone light in a way long ago learned was his way of establishing a sense of distance. So, he's trying to pull back after everything. Nope, I'm not gonna let him. You inched a little closer, expressing your intent to stay right where you were. This conversation wasn't over with a pleasantry. The slight hunch returned to his shoulders. Well, since I have you for a minute, I wanted to mention it earlier, but there wasn't a convenient moment.
Lovely.
Your outfit. You look wonderful, Jules. Jeez. How dare. How very dare. Since the style is very tasteful, you were truly a showstopper all to yourself. Though I guess I shouldn't be surprised at this point. It was true years ago, and it is even more so now. He was talking quickly, his eyes never seeming to settle in one place for long. Despite all the compliments, you found that it all washed over you without making much of an impression. More than anything, you were disappointed. Baxter was deflecting and doing so in the only way he knew how. It might have been funny to you. Once. I won't keep you any longer. I'm sure you'd appreciate a chance to relax after a tiring week. Before you could react, he was stepping away from the window. In an instant, he was in line with you. In another, he had passed. You knew how this whole song and dance went. He'd led you through it once before. You tried your hardest, but Baxter wasn't willing to meet you halfway. Then there's nothing to be done. He decided to break out on you yet again, step by measured step. And then, with a long, drawn-out exhale, Baxter stopped after a few paces, his back to you. Saw a hand come up to pinch the bridge of his nose. Baxter turned slightly, glancing over his shoulder so his gaze met yours. You didn't say anything. You didn't dare to, like he was a wild animal at risk of being spooked. He closed his eyes for a few seconds and breathed in and out. You blinked and then he was coming back in your direction, his face set in a determined expression. He stopped a few feet from where you stood, the heels of his dress shoes snapping together.
I'm sorry.
You must think I'm avoiding you deliberately. You made a kind of hybrid shrugging, nodding gesture to indicate that, yeah, you'd gotten that feeling. It's hard to miss. You made a noise that was one part laugh, another part sigh. Of course I am. My hope was that you wouldn't notice. What you don't know won't hurt you at all, lad. Why would you think I wouldn't notice? I don't know. Wishful thinking. You always know more about me than is convenient. And since that plan is dashed, I wouldn't want you to get the wrong impression about why. It isn't your fault, and I haven't forgotten everything that happened last night.
It's...
Only that this highly specific situation that has reawakened my reticence, you might say. What about it? Baxter silently stared over the expansive city for a while, as if collecting his thoughts. Then he finally spoke to you, really spoke to you, as two people who knew each other with no pretenses in between. It's been hard not to feel nostalgic this past week. We've had quite a stroll down memory lane, sometimes by happenstance, sometimes because I went out of my way to do so. I have fond memories of those days in Sunset Bird, treasured memories. Like most treasures, they're things to be taken out and admired from time to time, and then put away again. Though some are too delicate for even that. They should never be touched. He was talking mostly to his shoes. His hands had snuck into his pockets in an uncharacteristically timid gesture.
It's...
This evening is a reprise of something I never wished to relive. His voice was soft, plaintive. There was an ache in it. That party was wonderful. The party planner appreciation party. Oh, he remembered it too. Of course he did. This is Baxter. It had been so long since I'd known what it was like to be included, to be around people who refused to let you be left out, no matter how hard you tried to weasel out of it. Terry, Miranda, and Cove were too kind, but it was your gesture specifically that are at the heart of this matter. He laughed then, a nervous, gasping thing, and pressed a hand instinctively to his chest.
Truthfully.
Here's the truth. If you didn't ask me to dance again in the after hours of another event we helped create like you did then, it would have broken my heart. That would mean definitively that I lost what we had. Baxter's tone shook. His hand dropped to the side, where it balled into a fist. The air around you was very still. But if you did ask, it would be more painful, because that would mean... Baxter struggled to put his deepest feeling into words. The first attempt died off, but he squared his shoulders and forced himself to get it out. It would mean even after everything, you hadn't let me go, that you accepted me still. That you always would have, that I should have believed that all along, that the only thing I've done was hurt you and myself of my own accord. There was a pain to his words that shocked you to hear. Though by now you would never have made the mistake of thinking he lacked emotion, Baxter still so rarely displayed this kind of naked vulnerability. Baxter tucked his face away from you. It's horrible. I didn't want to know one way or the other. Oh my gosh, this idiot!
I'm sorry.
I'm fairly pathetic, you understand. That truly was the core of it. Baxter couldn't let himself be happy, no matter what. He was scared to hope and too ashamed of himself to try. So, is it too late to ask for that dance? There's no music. The response came out as nothing more than a defeated whisper. There was a faint sheen to his eyes. And yet Baxter raised his left hand with the palm turned up in a familiar gesture. You cautiously placed your hand atop his. His fingers were cooler to the touch than you expected. Slowly, with gentle care, he began to lead Baxter into a dance. It was hardly a brilliant display of artistry, more sophisticated sway than anything else. He traced out the sides of a square, lilting in time to an imagined beat. His shoes clicked against the empty dance floor, the only sound to be heard besides the omnipresent whisper of the air conditioner. You didn't say anything more. Your mind was lost in memory. That and the sensation of proximity. It was easy to forget how intense the fact of being mere inches away from another human being could be. This person in particular. Gosh, I don't know why, but I'm thinking about the others. I'm sure they are watching avidly trying to figure out what's going on. Without trying not to eavesdrop, but gosh, I bet they're so freaking curious. The complex, minute variations in eye shade you only ever notice up close. A rich brown, warm as the earth, and the delicate curl of the eyelashes. Baxter adjusted his posture stiffly, and it was only then that he became aware of the fact that he'd been staring even more intently than the circumstances demanded. It would have been worrying if not for the rosy tint creeping into his complexion. He wasn't upset by the attention. After a few quiet revolutions, he found more he wanted to tell you. Jules, I know I hurt you. I always have, but awareness and acknowledgement mean nothing. I haven't made attempts to actually make you feel better. From the moment you walked into that restaurant, my actions were nothing but self-preservation and damage control, and occasionally reminiscing to an extent I was pleased with.
Yes.
I had a professional commitment not to let personal matters impede the work that needed to be done, but my distancing went far beyond that. In the end, I was using their marriage as an excuse. If not for that, then there would have been something else, some trivial reason for keeping you at arm's length. That likely doesn't shock you. I know, I'm not surprised. I should have done better by you, Jude and Scott as well. Baxter's eyebrows lifted in the middle, a penitent expression.
To be honest,
But if you could still believe me, I hadn't intended for my behavior today to be quite as cruel as it must have come across. Your ears perked. You couldn't guess where this was going now. I sure don't. In the past, I spent every moment around other people thinking of the limited span of our acquaintance, as if I wasn't seeing them at all, only the imminent departure. Our arrangements fell in line with that, a clear time frame, limited from the outset, predetermined rules set in stone. It was that way 5 years ago. It was that way now. We'd cooperate for a short period in service of Scott and Jude's wedding, and that would be that. I've said as much myself, more than once.
but
The problem is, as I only recently realized, he leaned in a little closer, his voice dipping in volume, letting you in on a secret. I forgot about that. Huh? I'm with Jules. I'm not quite sure where he's going with this, but I think I do, but it is kind of sad that he was thinking only of how limited the friendship would be, the relationship. Seeing the opening incredulity on your face, Baxter gave a dry chuckle. You see, I thought completely and earnestly that I didn't need to speak with you now, here, when I was feeling so sensitive. We could simply pick up where we left off later tonight or tomorrow. The fact that we no longer had a reason to interact didn't come up as a part of the consideration. What? This entire time you'd agonized over the idea that after this wedding he'd cut you off, and Baxter was there, already imagining what the two of you might be doing next Tuesday. I know, who'd have guessed it was possible to retain a connection with someone, even with no limited set of circumstances to support it. Baxter laughed once, and it was real, but then he returned to utmost seriousness. I'm not going to simply vanish. Not again. Oh gosh. That's so huge. For him especially. I apologize for how stressful this was. I apologize for everything I've ever done to you. It's a little hard to approach what I've sowed over the years. So many mistakes. And even now, when I hope to make things right, to make things last, I'm forced to admit that I'm ignoring the reality of the situation. Baxter shook his head ruefully. This doesn't come down to what I want at all. I don't have the right to put myself before you. I never did.
Forgive me.
Sorry, I know I'm rambling. The point is, if this is going to continue the way I've been silently picturing, I can't be shallow company. It's getting harder and harder to listen to Baxter talk about himself this way. Again, he recalled your shared history, and even he spent listening to him pour his heart out over your dining room table. A part of you wanted to interrupt. There's no denying the truth of some of it. Yes, you were still nursing the scars of what Baxter had done to you, but he had gone beyond contrition. There was one thing that stopped you in your tracks, however, the words sticking in your throat. Right now, Baxter was being utterly sincere. You thought long and hard about this, and so, despite your misgivings, you held your tongue and waited. And on that front, there's some of my own advice, which I should have followed a long time ago. When the time comes, don't pull away. You'll only regret it later. The words were out before you even noticed, the scene echoing in the back of your mind as you said it. Baxter blinked, startled. Then his features softened for the first time since you'd approached him. Exactly. Wait. Isn't that what he said to that guy at the interactive party thing? How apt that was. So honestly, I can't believe I had the audacity to say such a thing to another person, even if they were a fictional character. Okay, yeah, alright. Do you know how long it's been since I played that part? Still, in my ignorance, I had a point. My 19-year-old self had a few ideas worth keeping, and he had people I should have held on to as well. Baxter squared his jaw and leveled his chin, drawing himself up and looking at you full in the face.
I don't want us to separate after today.
Oh gosh, hearing that, not just reading it, hearing it, oh my goodness. Whew. So there you have it. I would like to become your friend, or remain your friend, today, tomorrow, a month from now, a year from now, as long as you want. His heart's desire was made physically manifest by the way he held your hand like he would never let it go. I like to listen to what's on your mind, as a true friend would, even if it's challenging, and I will explain myself as well. I felt a gentle squeeze against your left hand, lingering for a moment, and then he slipped out of your grasp, dance coming to an abrupt end. He took a half step backwards. We're in public, and I can understand how it might be uncomfortable to do in this exact moment. I will follow you anywhere else.
I understand.
Of course, that's assuming this is something you want. I won't push this if it's not what would help, but I'm committed to making amends, if I can. As Baxter patiently awaited your response, you mentally scrambled to make sense of how you felt about the situation. It was all so sudden, so unexpected, right? Guys, I did not expect you to do this! Mere months ago, you'd been convinced you'd seen the last of him, and now Baxter's recanted all his past behavior and declaring his earnest wish to make it right. Whew! Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. For all that happened over the last week, for all the times you'd imagined a conversation like this taking place, to be confronted with the possibility now. So we are going to kiss him, damn it! You were entranced by his dark and wavering eyes. He was there. Baxter was actually right there in front of you. You could feel him, the warmth of his hand radiated in your palm like you'd gathered the last ember from a fireplace. Your heart squeezed painfully tight. It needed to be smaller to push its way into your throat. More than anyone else, Baxter had been an ethereal presence in your life. From the very first time he'd appeared before you when you didn't even know it. He was a mysterious stranger on the edge of a dance floor at the summer soiree. It was a memory that lingered in your mind, scurrying between clarity and a dreamlike vision, but never truly forgotten. That boy crystallized in your thoughts for good when the teenager he grew into suddenly appeared on your own neighborhood street. The summer of 2016 was more than you could have imagined, all because of him. In the few months you'd spent together then, a delicate relationship had blossomed between you. But during those days, you were unable to grasp how fragile it had actually been, how completely it would decay. But there's no holding on to your suitor for a season. He tore himself away from you like an autumn storm bringing down a sapling. His cycle being lost and found before letting go continued in an endless loop miles away from you. Your life kept going in its own direction for 5 whole years. Yet no matter how much it pained you, the affection you'd nurtured still hadn't died. Not from the downpour or the long winter that followed. The roots kept hold deep inside, ready to burst through the surface if the chill ever passed. Seasons were meant to come and go, but there's no guarantee summer would come again for you and him. Your paths had no reason to cross. Except they did. Again. You were given a third chance. The young man at a party for a single night, the tourist for one summer, the planner for a wedding, Baxter Ward. This time he's reaching out to you. This time he could say. He'd change. What about you? You could keep hold if you tried. The man himself, in the present, was waiting cordially as he sorted through your many thoughts. The packs of anxiety had formed at the corners of his mouth and the creases of his eyes. The more the sun stretched, the more Baxter slipped into his forced professional pleasantness. Against his core nature, he'd been vulnerable. What you might say in response to that was eating away at him. Baxter was important to you, more than he believed. That's what made you pause. Since meeting again, the charm and excitement he'd felt in your younger years had grown into an irreplaceable love. You'd reaffirmed the decision. This was your moment, and you would take it. The wedding was over. It was done. You didn't have to worry about making complications for Jude and Scott anymore. All that mattered is what you felt and what Baxter felt, and you weren't going to wait an extra minute to find out what that was. Besides, he asked you out the first time. It's only fair that you do it the second go-round. We're gonna go for enthusiasm. Excitedly, you flung your arms around him and finally smooched Baxter. The enthusiasm was almost enough to send you both tumbling to the ground. Luckily, though sort of unfortunately, Baxter braced himself the moment you moved. He didn't let you fall, and you could put your whole heart into the gesture. His blood, his face. It wasn't the first time you kissed him, though it still felt like a whole new experience. Baxter had gotten a little taller, his shoulders were broader too, and you knew this meant something entirely different than it had when you were teenagers. There was no going back. A beat passed, then another. Baxter didn't do anything else after the initial utterance except look at you with sharp-eyed incredulousness. He was giving you all the time you needed to come to your senses and pretend that didn't happen. Typical Baxter. But no matter how long he hedged, this wasn't going away. Another dance. Jules! The former competitive dancer stumbled along. He couldn't quite get his footing while you led him in wide sprawls across the empty floor. I want to be with you. That's what the kiss meant. The point was made. You kindly pressured Baxter against his will into saying more than 2 words about it.
I swear.
Forgive me for asking an impolite question, but what could I possibly have done? Not a hint of his usual wryness or teasing sarcasm caught the words. It's a flat request for understanding. In fact, never mind. I know what I've done. I didn't do anything that should lead to this. I treated you terribly. His tone had become icy. Hints of the person Baxter was 5 years ago were resurfacing. The hesitancy to attach too strongly, the disbelief that he had a right to do so. Honestly, you weren't upset at or surprised by his instinctive response to romantic overtures. You'd known him too long for that. Did you even realize how hard he was grasping your hand? It was almost painful. That's true, but I forgive you. I understand why it happened then and why it doesn't have to happen now. You matter to me. His chest rose and fell shakily. He couldn't look at you any longer and turned his face away. Baxter wasn't willing to say you were wrong or a liar, but neither could he agree with the conclusion. It was a bad idea. You were making a mistake. Those were the thoughts you guessed he was keeping to himself. Change of approach might be helpful here. You wanted Baxter to embrace the love you had for him, but that didn't have to be the first step. Will you at least let me know that what I mean to you, whether we're together or not? I want to know that much. Slowly, only out of the corner of his eyes, Baxter surveyed you critically. How inconsiderate. Ask me that. You're aware, likely more than anyone else, what a difficult question that is. Yes, I do, but I'm saying it anyway. While you wanted to hold on, Baxter took that as his cue to release his clutch on your hand. Fine, I'll answer both what I feel and what I might do about that. Only proper after you've gone to so much effort.
But
First, I need to give a few, prefaces. Okay, I'm listening. Donning an aloof expression, Baxter pulled at the fitted cuff of his formal shirt. I can't stand doing anything in the morning, even if I can pretend to, for clients. Baxter's guarded stance quirked briefly, then continued matter-of-factly. Can't afford elaborate trips these days, and my only remaining social contacts are limited to the wedding industry, not performance theater or owners of fancy cars or the like. I never needed that. In that case, your commitment changed his demeanor for the worse. Stoicism gave way to despondence. He threw out his hands in defeat. I've never been a good partner, even a good friend to anyone in my life. You were to me. What happened at the end doesn't undo everything. No matter how many of these considerations he laid out, it was never going to change how important he was to you. You could have reassured him all day, but then a glint of light flickered in his features. Baxter's lips tugged into a hopeful smirk. You should also know I'm not one for flings anymore.
Is that
Are you
fine?
entirely positive you want to go down this route with me? It might not be as fun, or as easy, or as short as you're picturing. I want it to last. It's your turn, Baxter. Full of determination, you repeated the questions he'd promised to face. Do you want this to happen? Do you care for me? Baxter watched you, quietly, carefully, noting each and every line in your expression and bend in your stance. He was nothing if not attuned to the finer details. Then, with the flick of his wrist, you had your answer. In a word, yes. Wait, did he agree? Just like that? As soon as you questioned it, the instant you were taken aback, Baxter grinned wolfishly. Baxter wasn't pushed onto the back foot any longer.
I love you.
In a few more, absolutely, Mix Hunt, I'm in love with you. Finally! Finally! I didn't stop wanting to be with you. Your jaw dropped at that change in tune. You remained amused. Now, I won't belabor my objections on your taste in men. That's not what you want to hear. This comes down to what I think, and that was never actually a question, as I suspect you knew. When I left 5 years ago, that didn't make me happy. When I kept you at arm's length after meeting you again, I was unhappy still. If it doesn't need to be that way, if I was wrong, then I don't know. Honestly, I've never considered it a viable option until moments ago. But I do know what would make me happy in an ideal world.
It's you.
Yes, yes, yes. Baxter gave a bow that was somehow both earnestly deferential and jokingly self-mocking. He knew he was being ridiculous, and you did too. Yet Baxter wouldn't be himself without his flair for the absurd. Exactly. I certainly hope that is acceptable. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Another kiss. You hadn't caught him by surprise. The response was immediate. Baxter pressed into the kiss, into you, as much as his restrictive uniform would allow. You should have expected his reaction, for as fast as he cooled, Baxter could heat up even quicker given the proper motivation. And although you were kissing for the second time in this one conversation, he looked forward to the day when he could no longer even count how many times you'd done it. Then Baxter pulled away to speak, still grinning, now panting. Should I take that as a yes? You should. There are many things we can both still do.
I can do that.
Duly noted. I can make that work. You make me happy, too. Baxter slipped his hand into yours once more to finish the dance started long ago. Two of you were in sync then, your pace increasing time with one another as you took turns laying the other around the floor that remained all yours. Baxter tilted his head, a humorous thought coming to mind. He was kind enough to share it. Nothing needed to be held back anymore. Of course, proposing during a wedding is an absolute no-no. Deciding to date after the event has already concluded should avoid the faux pas. I'm sure the grooms can find it in their hearts to forgive us. Very true. Your romp ended with a grandiose twirl under the golden lights of the setting sun striking right through the ceiling-length windows, an ideal backdrop for your private performance. You tried to catch your breath from, well, everything, but that wasn't an easy task considering you were laughing gleefully all the while. Baxter released your hand. He didn't need it since the dance was over, though he found plenty of reasons to keep you close in a gentle embrace.
You're too kind.
Thank you, Jules. You're very kind, to me most especially. His brown eyes were warm and inviting, an autumn beauty that made its way into your summer by luck, or chance, or fate. Always feeling out of place, Baxter kept slipping away. Now that would change. Seeing his face, it was undeniable. He wasn't some stranger there to do a hired gig or even an old fling you happened to be reunited with. He was particular and proper, distant and difficult, shameless and smug, and Baxter Ward was yours. It seems our story has a happy ending after all. That's quite the surprise, Yeah, we've come a long way. After 5 years apart and a stubborn insistence to maintain that distance on Baxter's part, the two of you could stay together. You were so grateful. How could you ever need anything more? Well, my charming partner, I have a proposition for you. Or maybe not. More might be on the table after all. Oh, what is it? Having your rapt attention bolstered his already impressive boldness. If I'm recalling this correctly, now that Jude and Scott are leaving on a honeymoon, you will be alone in their home. That sounds fairly dull, not to mention inconvenient.
In that case...
I would be delighted to have you come over to my apartment for the remainder of this trip. You're asking me to stay with you? I am. Again, there's no reason to waste time, and I would be a heartless lover to not even offer. Stunning. You really could never underestimate what Baxter would pull out of his tailored sleeves. I mean, we've seen him almost completely naked, just in his underwear. Though, if that would be too much, I won't be insulted. Staying one night doesn't require you to stay for longer. Getting more personal time with Baxter before you had to go, or sitting by yourself in the Adams guest room, the decision made itself. Sounds nice, Baxter. I'd really appreciate that. He was thrilled, and so were you. Everything was positively ideal. Excellent. In that case, it's all almost settled. Huh? Almost?
You know...
Yes, it's not finished yet. We're going to have to meet with our audience at some point. Our audience? Completely forgot about our friends. Of course, I didn't forget, but the character did. They traveled off to the side in a matching motion to Baxter. Miranda, Terry, and Cove were still crowded around the tables, except rather than getting any work done, and they were watching the two of you like it was the latest in daytime soaps. Oh, I forgot about them. So it wasn't exactly a private show. Baxter chuckled. Why would a little thing like having one of the most emotional interactions in life be a public event bother him? It wouldn't. Not Baxter. Well, it would have been a big problem if things had ended badly. Since it didn't, he was unstoppable. Hand in hand. They continued to gawk even after you'd become distinctly aware of their impropriety. When you reached their part of the room, Baxter offered a cordial greeting and inclined his head along with the words,
Good day.
"A marvelous evening to you, friends." Yeah.
Huh?
Uh-huh. More awkward silence. The three of them glanced between one another, their expressions uncomfortably pulled wide and tall. So, you're dating again? Baxter, however, needed no interlude for his response. It came without hesitation. Excellent deduction, Terry. That is correct. Cove gaped like one of his beloved fish. If he hadn't been sitting down, he would have fallen over. Also similar to a fish having to navigate on dry land. You're dating Baxter again? This was giving you flashbacks to the last time you told people you'd started dating Mr. Ward. No one ever seemed to believe it. Why? Baxter was so wonderful. He had some questionable qualities, sure. That didn't change his incredible appeal. That was a hill you'd die on. Yup. Yes, I am.
Is that all?
And you're both sure about that. Both, she said. That was not what she meant. Based on Miranda's wary side glance, the question was aimed right at you. It was a valid concern. You'd been hurt by him before. Neither of us are taking this lightly. Sure, it's not going to be easy to have a serious, lasting relationship, but it's something we want to try for. Then, congratulations. That's amazing. Miranda beat all the others to the punch in terms of showing excitement. However, she wasn't the last. Terry literally bopped you and Baxter on the arms in his chair.
Finally!
Welcome back for good, B-Man. You're never getting rid of us now. Baxter rubbed the small circles into where he'd been struck. The nudge couldn't possibly have hurt. You felt how harmless it was. Maybe he was worried about wrinkles.
Thank
I
you.
think that warning applies more to the rest of you about me. I'm not leaving, no matter how many seasons come and go. But thank you. Cove's distinctive wavy brow stayed pinched. To say he doubted that would be an ocean-sized understatement. He did manage to smile for you, not the sunshiny beam of joy you love to see. It was his soft, I'm here for you look. Don't be terrible, okay? I want Jules to be happy.
I appreciate the understanding.
Of Of course, I appreciate your openness to the idea. Well, that was still a work in progress, clearly. You weren't worried. Cove has struggled to talk to Baxter even before he vanished for half a decade. You could give him time to get used to it. Both those men were going to be a big part of your life going forward, and at least Cove was willing to be civil. Your friends accepted your judgment in your new boyfriend, and that was something to celebrate. Thanks. That means a lot. It was a good time to mention the next little piece of news, too. Also, I'm going to stay with Baxter for a while. Baxter laughed at your direct explanation. He placed a hand on his head and nodded confidently.
Yeah.
That's right. Their faces. I invited Jules to be a guest at my apartment since Jude and Scott had left on their honeymoon. That way they don't have to be there alone during the rest of the stay in the area. Also because I would simply enjoy having their company.
Sorry.
Already with that? Terry cracked a smile and gave Miranda a nudging elbow as she needed to get a look at this. Then he whistled. I don't know how he does it, but the man has done it. He whistled louder this time, and Miranda slapped a hand across her mouth. She spun away from the group. It was still obvious by the way her shoulders were shaking that she was laughing. But really, how did you do it?
To be honest,
I'm not quite sure how either, though I imagine it has more to do with Jules' generosity and kindness than any quality I possess. Jerry and Miranda exchanged a silent grin with one another and then shared it with you. Somehow you managed to defy the odds. It was a marvel to everyone standing there that everything had worked out. Working as a team, those left in the venue carried piles of boxes and bags into the elevator and down to Terry's van. It took a few trips, a couple of high fives, one dive for the elevator doors, and many silly comments, and it was done. Then came the final puzzle, fitting it all in the vehicle. After some creative arrangement work inside the trunk, what remained of the wedding had been safely packed away. Together with Terry and Cove, you squished the trunk door shut and pressed. When you heard it click into position, the three of you slumped forward and sighed wearily. Terry spun on his heel and wiped his forehead with another of his exaggerated displays of exhaustion. Phew, another successful party in the bag. Terry moved to Miranda's side and hooked his arm around her shoulders. He playfully pulled her in close. We're professionals at this point. Miranda rolled her eyes, but nothing could derail her unmistakable delight in her boyfriend's proclamation. She lightly patted his hand on her shoulder. Terry, Baxter is a professional. Did you forget?
Nah.
That only proves my point. We're doing the same work. Miranda giggled and simply accepted Terry's argument. She shook her head as she calmed down.
Thank you.
None of this would have been possible without any of you. We did a great thing for my family. Thank you so much. Miranda sniffled and blinked, trying to keep the tears away. I think the wedding was great. You did a really good job. Terry nodded solemnly and gently rubbed the side of Miranda's arm. Baxter watched over the group, smiling earnestly. Despite all the talk about being professionals, it was the least businesslike Baxter had acted around them in 5 years.
you're good.
Likewise, your efforts were impressive. Thanks everyone, go team! Wiping your palms on sides of your fine attire, it was hard to believe the wedding was truly done. It kind of felt like you'd won a championship. You were in need of a shower and a big block of uninterrupted sleep, but you also felt a huge surge of pride for the hard work that paid off today. We actually made it. Woo! Terry threw a fist in the air with his cheer, and Miranda joined him on the next one. Baxter clapped gracefully.
Fun.
Yes! Yay! Party and planning committee reunion! On that note, the wedding was officially done. There was no reason for any of you to return to the empty event room, and tomorrow strangely lacked any important appointments. There wasn't a single reason remaining for you to set foot in Baxter's office anytime soon. It was entirely at an end. The only traces of what originally brought the five of you back together had been unceremoniously stuffed into the van. It was unintentional, but he stood there in a moment of silence until Baxter used that opening to clear his throat. Since we're gathered here, and there's no longer a wedding to fuss over planning anymore, I must use this opportunity to properly apologize to the rest of you. Baxter threaded his fingers through his hair and faced the uncertainty staring back at him. To not beat around the bush, I treated your friendship and the time we spent together inconsiderately. I decided things for you and about you without letting you have a say in it.
I'm sorry.
I was wrong to do that. It was unfair, and I'm sorry. Sincerity left the three unable to react. At first, anyway. Gradually, the words sunk in, and your friend's attention flickered between you and him. The corners of Terry's mouth sagged into a satisfied smile. He proudly raised his chin and bumped his fist into Baxter's shoulder.
Finally.
I always knew you had it in you. Better late than never, B-man. Miranda bashfully wrapped a straight curl around her finger and hummed in agreement.
Yep.
There's no reason why we need to forgive you anymore. Exactly, so don't worry. It's all water under the bridge now. So they were more upset on my behalf. That's sweet. Sure, forget it. We can start over. Finally, Baxter set the fire down. He breathed a deep sigh of relief. The weight of his worries visibly lifted free. How long was he wanting to do that? Years, you imagined, anxiously picturing the possible directions that conversation could have gone.
I appreciate the understanding.
Again. Yep, we're understanding people. Alrighty, so... Terry clapped and then pointed at the van. Miranda and Cove nodded, understanding what that cue meant. Some of us are still going to have to unpack this mess. We got to get out of here. Right, Randy? Uh-huh. Sorry. No, please, go on. Short goodbyes were traded, then Terry, Miranda, and Cove casually slid into the van. Somehow, Mr. Holden had convinced Cove to stay in his old bedroom despite it being turned into a makeshift storage container. The others were going to drop him off on their way. He'd encouraged him to do it, even though he would have been happy to join you in the Adams house. Cove rolled down his window and propped himself on his elbow. He waved you closer.
Oh,
By the way, it's going to be a busy day for me tomorrow. Me and my dad, you know. Terry leaned back in his seat and tried to spot you through the back window. When he couldn't see past Cove's body, he opted to yell his comment. Randy and I are working. Things go well, you're going to have time to yourself after all this. Thanks. After that, sleepy promises to see each other soon were shared, and then at long last, everyone went on their way for the night. There was one final pit stop left before you could return to Baxter's place in the city and rest. Jude and Scott's house. The suburbs were calling you to come and collect your clothes. Baxter used the moment alone to check if you were truly alright with your friends being aware of the relationship. We're going to go with the first one, but that's not to spring it on anyone else without preparation going forward. During the drive, you sent them a text to let them know how your plans had changed. Newlyweds responded quickly, and they were thrilled to hear that you would have company while you were still in the area. While they never outright said it, you got the impression over the last few days that they had been feeling guilty. Honeymoon or not, leaving a house guest behind just didn't sit right with either of them. Their thoughtfulness and concern were appreciated, but now the lot of you could breathe easy. Before putting your phone away, you sent off one last text wishing them well and safe travels on their honeymoon. They replied instantly and thanked you for helping to give them one of the best days of their lives. When you reached the house, Baxter parked the car, and followed you out. In seconds, you unlocked the front door with the handy spare key you'd been gifted and let him inside. It struck an odd note, observing how silent the house was without Jude or Scott to fill the space. You were newly relieved to not be there by yourself. Though it kind of sucked to have to pack so soon after cleaning the event room, there was a growing anticipation in your gut that spurred you on. There was no way of knowing what to expect from temporarily moving yourself in with Baxter, but you were optimistic. Peeking past your shoulder, you spotted Baxter in the doorway. He was graciously waiting on standby, and once you were ready, he stepped in and helped carry your bags to his car. Not once did he utter a single complaint, but fortunately he also hadn't brought nearly as much as the entire wedding's worth of things. Between the two of you, it didn't take as long as it took to pack Terry's van, and then you were ready to go. Again. But you did one more sweep of the house to make sure everything was in check, nothing was left on, and you locked the door. And the two of you were on your way once more. From there, Baxter brought you to his apartment for a second time and pushed the door open. He flipped a nearby light switch on, and together you went inside. Naturally, you weren't nearly as out of place as before. Baxter wanted you there, and that invitation made a huge difference. Sighing drowsily, your body knew there was nothing left to worry about. You could finally rest. Baxter seemed equally ready to collapse at the end of a long chain of stressful challenges.
Now?
Well, no. He exhaled deeply, and despite his weary demeanor, Baxter offered you an amiable smile. Are you ready to get settled in? We can bring the bags into your room. Then you'd be free to get changed into something more comfortable or to pass out. Anything you wish. For a moment, you found yourself caught on his choice of words, declaring the guest room as plainly yours. It was wonderful, but also almost far-fetched to believe that you held a concrete place within Baxter's world. That's a great idea. After the busy day you had, you were more than ready to put on something infinitely more comfortable. Wonderful. Baxter rubbed the side of his neck and yawned. He took a pause to get his sore body moving again, and at some point his thoughts wandered off elsewhere. Yes. Glanced roughly in the direction of his bedroom and sighed. Crossing your arms, you tilted your head curiously. What's wrong? As we're calling the state of my own room, and I'm fairly certain it's a mess thanks to the debacle this morning, so nothing important. I'm not eager to tackle that tonight. It's a problem, I'll deal with that at a later date. I'm good at that, aren't I? His usual self-derisive drabbing had all but the bite taken out of it, smirked with honest amusement. Pretty good. It was kind of funny, which was wild. Then Baxter brushed the thought off and returned his attention to the present task. He helps you carry your bags. I'll come back to the living room area once I'm finished getting out of this uniform. Feel free to change and decompress at your own leisure. He answered with a content but sleepy hum and followed Baxter to the guest room. Once your bags were safely inside, he cleared his throat.
See you.
Please, excuse me for now. After that, he swiftly exited the room, for the first time in a long while, watching him go didn't strike an odd chord. The two of you would talk later, and you knew that for a fact. The apartment wasn't that big, so there wasn't a chance that you could miss each other. In the meantime, you began unpacking and rearranging your things in this new space. There was no rush, but the small changes were comforting. Later, when you were showered and dressed, much more comfortably in your sleepwear, you found yourself wandering into the living room. There you spied Baxter leaning over the counter in the kitchen. You had some realization, despite spending the previous night in the same place, you never had caught a glimpse of what Baxter wore to bed. All you saw was the sight of him in his sleepy underwear. Baxter remained obscured behind the furniture and perused something on his phone with a creased brow. He wondered if there was some wrap-up still needed for the contractors that worked on the wedding. Before he could ask, Baxter joyfully abandoned his phone on the counter because of your arrival. He straightened his back to his full height. And you got the best view of what he was wearing. White silk jammies with a shiny black trim. On his feet, a pair of zebra-striped fuzzy slippers. There we go. Jules, hello again. He unconsciously smoothed the front of his shirt, but froze the second he touched the silken material. The corner of his mouth quirked. I'm pleased to see you're seeming relaxed after the day we had. I am aware of how this looks with the limited color scheme of my attire. I kindly ask you not to laugh. Wow, some things really do stay the same. Leaning your hip against the side of the counter, you smirked playfully. Baxter was monochrome from his head to his feet. If you wanted to pretend you had outgrown that particular taste, that was fine, but the truth was a blinking white sign staring you in the face. Black and white really are your colors. Baxter covered his mouth and momentarily tried to turn away. He instantly failed to hide his own amusement. Oh, fine, I confess, I haven't outgrown the aesthetic as much as I claim. Black and white remains my preferred color scheme. And all my pajamas are these colors, so you're bound to put all the puzzle pieces together. Your cheeks began to ache from a splitting grin. Baxter crossed his arms, but his expression remained fond. I only wish to indulge in my habits in a private manner. It'll be our secret, then. Baxter's mouth opened, but his phone buzzed before he could speak. Is that work? It shouldn't be. Baxter reached over the counter and checked. His playfulness quickly vanished and his smile strained. Regrettably, no, not work. This should be significantly more painful. His voice fell to a hushed whisper, then reached for the phone. Hello, Xavier. He murmured the name like his own personal arch-nemesis. He recognized it immediately. Xavier was a baker and Baxter's work acquaintance who considered him a friend regardless. That put the reason for the night call in Baxter's words into a much better context. Baxter lightly tapped the screen and set the phone on speaker.
Hi.
Sorry to call so late. I wanted to check in on how the wedding went, and on you now that it's done. Are you holding up all right? Baxter's gaze landed on you. The day you met Xavier, Baxter was still trying to push you away as quickly and professionally as he could. It was incredible how changed.
How wonderful.
That's so considerate. Yes, I would say I'm doing quite well. Wow, you're such a sweetheart. Thank you. Wait, Baxter, who is the... Xavier cut himself off mid-sentence. Baxter, meanwhile, leaned against the side of the counter, and his smirk twisted in amusement. He didn't appear to be willing to clarify the conversation anytime soon. Jules, right? That's who you are? Uh-huh, you got it. Yes, I thought so. I certainly thought so. Hi, Jules. The tone in Xavier's voice shifted smugly. He watched a small crease form in Baxter's brow. So, Jules still in your presence, Baxter? Yes, they are. Even though the wedding is finished. L. Xavier huffed confidently as if their designs had all gone to plan, despite them not having any part of it.
That's incredible.
That's lovely. I'm truly happy to hear that, Baxter.
Of course.
I'm sure you are. I also invited Jules to stay at my apartment for the remainder of their trip.
They're rooming at your apartment?
Didn't you swear up and down that you were, I quote, never going to associate with them after the wedding? Baxter met your eye for a split second and found himself staring at the ceiling. He tapped at the counter, smiling right. Neither nor Baxter knew what to say next. Xavier's plain words hung down.
So?
We should get together before Jules leaves. You did mention that before. I know, I meant it then. I mean it now. Baxter sighed quietly and brushed his hand through his hair. Things never really went his way interpersonal relationship-wise. Does tomorrow work? We can grab some coffee. Baxter hesitated and checked her face for an answer. He moved to speak, but remembered he was supposed to be good at managing people. Please hold. He automatically used his customer service voice and clicked the screen, putting the call on mute. Baxter carefully rested the phone case down. Breathed in deep and then slowly exhaled. Baxter wore toward a tired smile. I apologize. I should have anticipated that Xavier would follow through with that, on that threat or request. Actually, I did have something in mind for tomorrow. I gotta go see my mom's.
I understand.
Of course, you've been busy with the wedding preparation. Tomorrow was finally a free day. Right, I haven't seen my mom since I got here. They've been waiting for me to come home and visit. That's a wonderful plan. I can drive you to Sunset Bird in the morning and you can spend some quality time with your parents. They must be eager to see you. Nodding, you were curious about how your day was shaping up for tomorrow. Baxter's return to the neighborhood would be a massive surprise. Don't worry, I'll stay out of your way once you're there. Perhaps I'll accept that coffee with Xavier. What? I want you to come. You do? Yes, Baxter. I thought we were going to spend more time together. Baxter grew flustered in front of your growing frown. Poor thing, he thought he wasn't invited. He ruffled his hair and caused several pieces to stick out oddly in his frustration. His mouth pressed into a fine line.
I swear.
I'm doing it again. It's always my first response. He straightened himself out properly before speaking to you again. In the spirit of being truthful about my feelings, even when they're not ideal, I'll admit it. I'm nervous to meet your mothers again. I'm not exactly thrilled to see what would happen if I appeared in front of them. I doubt they've forgotten anything. I made a terrible impression on them, didn't I? That's fair, but you can't avoid them forever. That's not the strategy that works, remember? He rubbed the back of his neck and shrugged. Baxter seemed to be relieved you were at least able to understand one another. Old habits die hard. Still, you should come with me. They'll forgive you. So they do dislike you. Nothing is as bad as it feels in your thoughts. My parents are sweet, and they're going to hear about the wedding anyway. You were an important part of that story. Unfortunately, those words did little to persuade Baxter. He continued to drag his feet over this predicament. He wasn't willing to accept the invitation, but he also wasn't willing to outright reject you either. I'll go with you to see Xavier if you'll come with me to visit my mom.
Oh?
Compromise, Xavier wants to meet in the morning. Didn't you want to visit your mom's first thing? Doesn't matter to me who we see first. Baxter chuckled at your easygoing answer, but then transitioned to a more pensive look. What is it? You're right, however, I prefer not to keep you from your family. Alright, we can plan to visit them first then. We could ask Xavier if we can hang out later on. Yes, that'll work quite nicely. I believe Xavier should accommodate that request easily. But where would we go for drinks? I wonder if that interactive play bar place could be visited as just a bar. It'd be nice to check it out after so long.
Oh!
Ah, yes, you can attend for the drinks and atmosphere even without catching a show. Great, that's what we could do. Then one final detail, would you be fine seeing your mother's not too early in the morning? You knew Baxter would agree to whatever you decided, but his brown eyes begged for mercy. Yep, that's fine with me. Baxter pressed a dramatic hand over his heart. He expressed a genuine sigh of relief.
Good.
I seem to have a plan. Now we need to run it by Xavier and their current schedule. Tap the screen and turn the mute setting off. Xavier, are you still there?
Mm-hmm.
I am. Excellent. Thank you very much for waiting. It is fine. I imagine Jules wouldn't let you hang up on me, even if you wanted to. Very funny. We just needed a moment to sort out a few pertinent details, and you're in luck. Jules does have time to see you tomorrow. However, rather than in the morning, we were thinking of meeting in the evening for drinks. There's a particular bar that we enjoyed in the past, and I think it would make a fun fit. Would that work for you? That sounds perfect.
It's settled.
We'll do it. I'll text you the address and a specific meet time after the call. You were proud of him. Baxter had well and truly changed. Okay, Jules is lucky to have such a well-mannered personal assistant. I am not their assistant. I'm Jules' friend. Oh, it warmed your heart to hear him proclaim that confidently. Yes, he has grown.
Even better.
I love Xavier. Xavier must have shared your joy hearing Baxter so freely allowing himself to be happy. In your mind, you could picture a warm smile crossing their face.
Goodbye for today.
Jules and I will see you tomorrow, Xavier. Goodbye. It was wonderful hearing from you.
Thank you.
I'm glad I caught you before your trip ended. Me too. I'm honestly not sure how I feel about you two spending more time together. You're thrilled, I'm certain. Bye! And so Baxter tapped the screen to end the call. He left the phone on the counter. Just like that, the two of you had a full day of plans set.
Well,
His full force smiled in. For a little while, you both managed to be casual, as if everything was normal and nothing had ever happened, like you'd never been apart. But in the late hour, when there was nothing left of casual life distractions, the lingering unease revealed itself. I apologize for keeping you up. I don't mind. Then, would you want to talk for a little longer? As sorry as I am, I don't think I've been as open as I could have been. You accepted how I was. Still am in some regards, but can't fully understand it. Am I right? He was. There's no denying it. You never grasped the reasons for the way he acted. Yeah, definitely not. We know obviously there has to be reasons, but nothing to indicate what those are. He was very careful to keep that from us. If you have something you want to say, I'd be glad to listen. Then, Baxter's attention wandered about his apartment. He slipped a hand into his pocket. Could we move this downstairs? The lobby of my building has an amenity I'm rather fond of. Interesting. This had already taken a turn for the unexpected, but if whatever it was would make him feel better, you could go with it. Sure. Thank you. He led you out of the apartment and down the elevator to the ground floor lobby. From there, you went to one corner where a seating area surrounded a chic modern fireplace. It was a light. That was what he was drawn to. You knew it without being told. Just like at the mountain cabin and up in the mountains. Here we are. After sweeping his hand out over the space, Baxter settled into a chair by the fire. You took a spot near him. The fire popped and crackled. He watched the flames, hypnotized by the way they danced. This is a humbler setting than the last fireside talk we had, isn't it? After such a long walk down memory lane, it would have been lovely to return to that mountain lodge together. Miranda and Terry will be taking a grand trip, on my suggestion, might I add. It only seems fair we should as well. Throwing up his hands in mock defeat, Baxter could only laugh to himself. Of course, when have I ever taken my own damned advice? Well?
Never.
Don't answer, I know. It's never, or perhaps never, until only today. Yep, that was the correct reply. At least in this case, it's not for lack of trying or a stubborn impulse to do the opposite of what would improve my life. It's that matter I warned you about, the charming reality of limited expendable income. Can't afford to flitter off on vacations whenever the mood strikes the way my parents can, but I have a very comfortable existence. He shrugged his shoulders, sinking deeper into his seat.
It's
Nice, if lonely. Of course, let's not pretend I have anyone to blame for that other than myself. I ended every relationship I had with my own actions. It's the story of my life. I want to be liked, but I don't want to be important. A suitor for a season, the planner at a wedding, it's that kind of role I'm comfortable in. Perhaps that's why I'm drawn to people who are wanted by everyone else. They don't need me. I can be someone. I can't be the one. Why? The word came out indistinctly before you could stop yourself. There's no reason for him to believe that about himself. You couldn't accept it. Baxter's arms and legs crossed as he closed his eyes in contemplation.
to be honest.
I'm not sure I would have been able to answer before, even if I wanted to, which I didn't until very recently, as you saw firsthand. I understood where my limits were, and generally I left it at that. But where did those lines come from? I'd begun to reflect on it since I met you again. Seeing you made me doubt my own motivations. And I came to a conclusion somewhere along the way. I did know. I knew it all along and simply chose not to think about it for a long time. Finally, he looked at you again. His eyes were a dark pool, crystal clear, but bottomless. I don't deserve to have that kind of relationship with another person. That's why. The same question came to the tip of your tongue. Why? You felt as if you were asking that with him, but this time you didn't have to. Baxter answered the unspoken plea on his own.
You need to
I
understand.
don't contribute anything. Maybe I can impress others for a time, but how do you go beyond that? You can't say what it means to be significant as a person, to be irreplaceable. And since I don't have the answer, I certainly wasn't going to assume I'd do it by accident. The more Baxter voiced these long-hidden feelings, the quieter he spoke. Baxter whispered to the fire as if he was all alone. What does it take to add value to someone simply by just being there? I tried, but I never knew. In my eyes, there's a world of humans living freely among one another, while every connection I create is so fragile. If I make the wrong step, I might hurt them, or be hurt myself, and if it's strained at all, it will break entirely. Of course, I could be entirely off the mark, and everyone else might have the same struggles. What would I know, right? Baxter smirked self-derisively, recalling he had an audience.
But
Still, it was frightening to want a deeper connection, because I couldn't do it. So I lived on, except what seemed to be my reality. It was painful listening to his innermost fears and insecurities, but Baxter wasn't done reflecting. You gritted your teeth and stayed quiet. I'm old enough to have forgotten my earliest years. Everything before about 6, maybe 7, is nothing but a vague blur. What I do distinctly recall is that as a child I unequivocally thought I was better than other people. That those who met me were lucky, and I could pick anyone I wanted as company. The onus was on everyone else to impress. If someone was boring, or maybe I just didn't like the colors they were wearing that day, I could find a new playmate easily. After all, I had the most to offer. Naturally, what I was offering was what my parents had. A big, cool house, exciting outings, the best toys. It wasn't until I was 11 or so when I developed my first stable friends. They might not have been rich like me, but they had their own charms, those ties that couldn't be replaced. Becoming attached to other people, especially those people, made me realize what I believed wasn't true. He straightened out his back and came up to the edge of the chair. And it was so obvious. They were wonderful. I felt things I never had before. All it took was being who they were. It didn't matter what their parents did. No fancy could top genuine camaraderie with their company.
truthfully,
And for whatever reason, I was in the club and I was happy. The person who was lucky to be there was me. Beautiful sparkle of sentimentality brightened his features even more than the glow of the fireplace. I had wanted my friends to feel the same way towards me, to have that kind of incredible effect on it, but then the light went out. But I was older than all of them. As sheltered as I was, I got along better with kids not quite my own age, immature as always. Life changed fast then, and the years between us became more noticeable with every day. I never reached a point where I felt like I knew what I was doing before suddenly it was as if I didn't belong with them anymore. They didn't have time to keep me around with the differences in our schedules and priorities, and I accepted that, so the friendships ended. We stopped talking as young teens, and I haven't seen them since I left for college in 2015. I thought they mattered to me, but when have I done anything for them? Why did I deserve to be liked and included when all I did was want that to happen and abandon them when it didn't? None of the animation, emotion, and life was left in Baxter's retelling. He continued hollowly. For me, I wonder what they think of if they do remember me. I wonder what they think of me now. But with a flick of his wrist, he barely brushed off the admission. For both aware, it's only as a full-grown man I've made many more mistakes than that. I hadn't given up the concept of vulnerability entirely, however. Baxter softened once more for a different confession. I've also missed you over those 5 years. And Carrie and Miranda and Cove and that summer in Sunset Bird, but mostly it was you who I thought of. During that trip, I did feel wanted.
you made me feel wanted and important.
Because you are. It was exciting and amazing. It was impossible it could last. The shine would wear off eventually, as always. I didn't want to see it happen. What if I seemed pathetic for being attached to people I met on a short vacation, You had your real group of friends who lived with you there already. Or what if you stopped responding to me after realizing I wasn't that interesting? Or why would I have even assumed there'd be a reason to talk to me at all once it was no longer convenient? I'm aware that it's not a kind way to view you, but it wasn't that you'd done something to make me believe it would happen. It's my viewpoint for every situation. You recalled the night before the wedding when Baxter admitted he dyed his hair. The problem on this end was very much the same thing. Baxter couldn't see its own value, and he had always feared others wouldn't either. For the first time since he began spelling out his heart, Baxter paused, considered the way he wanted to put his next words, and then continued. Back then, during my tourist phase, we took that brief trip to the mountains. On a hike, we passed a tree that had fallen across a stream. If you can picture that, it was as if we were on opposite sides, and I couldn't take the path you because it looked risky. Oh, you certainly haven't forgotten the experience. What he said didn't line up with your memories of that day. But Baxter, that's not something you did. We walked on it together and then went back to the same side. You crossed the stream bravely. That got him to chuckle, ever so slightly. That was my attempt at a poignant, personally relevant metaphor, but I'm quite impressed that you remembered the details. He shook his head more amusedly, eyes closed, and tossed both his hands up.
I understand.
I suppose that's the true story of my life, me not understanding a thing and getting it all wrong at every turn. Then Baxter set his attention on you completely. He wasn't playing around anymore. Quick tangent. It does put into perspective his upset over the way your initial copy date went. And then the way that he went over the top to make up for it. But rather than dancing around this, I'll say it directly. Not trying to stay in touch with you is something I've regretted for a long time. I will always regret the days I lost, even now that we've reconnected.
I'm sorry.
Jules. Many times, it'd be impossible to count how many. You'd imagine a moment like this, Baxter Ward standing or sitting in front of you, sharing with you his real feelings. You never thought it would happen. That dream was only a dream. And yet it was happening. You understood what he was thinking, what drove him away, why Baxter was so Baxter. Clarity you'd painfully wished for had come at last. Smooch time. Absolutely smooching. Baxter was initially confused by your sudden approach, and then flat out stunned when you held his face in your hands and pressed your lips against his. You desperately attempted to convey how strongly you felt. When you parted, Baxter patted your back gently, unsure if you were sad or hurt or what. Of course he wouldn't think your woes were for his sake. He was a silly gentleman. But it was wonderful, indulging in his warmth, and even better knowing you wouldn't have to let go again. Not for real. You've always mattered and should be cared about.
You're too kind.
Thank you for saying so. I appreciate you listening to your rambling lover for this long. Baxter smiled, truly moved. What was lost, what could never be, had been there all along if he just reached for it. And he accepted your words without buts, exceptions, or waving it off. You treasured him, and you could believe that he was starting to accept that. You couldn't have been happier. With Baxter's piece said and done, you both returned to your shared home. After an incredibly, exceedingly long day, you went right to sleep. The next morning, you ambled out of your room into the hall. Slept in a bit and were energized by it. Checking the apartment, you found the living room was empty and so was the kitchen. Baxter hadn't come out of his room. Signs of stirring either, so he probably wasn't awake. You thought there was at least a chance he beat you to the early worm, but that was not the case. After freshening up in the bathroom, you still had the place to yourself. But there were things you could do. Packing. Your trip was almost over after all. You dropped your suitcase in the bed and started to lazily fill it with bits and bobs. For all your good intentions, your head wasn't in it. Alone with your thoughts, you sank into reflecting on what happened before, imagining what could happen next. Until the sound of a door snapped you out of it. How long had it been? You had no idea, but you were sure that Baxter was up. Slow footsteps approached nearer and nearer, and then there was a knock. Come in. Carefully, Baxter let himself in. He peeked through an only half-open door.
Hey.
Good morning, Jules. Hey. Morning, Baxter. Don't leave you be if you're in the middle of something. Don't worry, I can do this later. He dropped the shirt you'd been haphazardly folding and joined him by the door, pushing it all the way open.
Excellent.
He gestured with a light wave, then clad again in fuzzy zebra print slippers, Baxter shuffled to the community space of the apartment. You followed along. He dropped like a sack of monochrome potatoes stairs. Baxter had no reason to rush that morning, so it could be as complacent, which was very much. Making it out from under his blanket hadn't meant he was ready to join the rest of the waking world. Baxter was lingering in the peaceful dreamland of his own home. He thought it was simply precious. Kissed his forehead. His eyes fluttered close as he gave him a soft peck. Baxter sighed sweetly. Baxter then curled his legs onto the cushion while stretching his arms up towards the ceiling. Feels as a lifetime ago, not yesterday. It was yesterday? He only murmured softly in response, unable to muster the energy for entire words. He took it delightfully easy while getting decent for the day. Baxter had a wide selection of lotions, oils, and creams for the skin and hair, which he would permit to rate as much or as little as he wanted. He made literal use of it himself. Kind of man with a 30-minute morning pampering routine. The two of you also got to enjoy a comfortably quiet breakfast together before finally heading out. You left the city behind, shot straight past the suburbs, and headed towards the horizon. A tiny tourist town came into view under the high noon sun. Baxter's car came to a stop along the side of the street. It was the same spot he used to have when he was a tourist. It already felt good to be back. You were energized, downright perky. Things had finally come full circle. We could get a chance to see No, please don't. Climbed out and strolled down the road to your childhood home. Now, my wonderful and forgiving Jules, Baxter spoke out haltingly.
Are you sure?
Are you positive this isn't going to be an unwelcome intrusion? I'm not saying this because I prefer to hide from my past. I'm done with that. But I think we can in space if they need it. Okay. I'll be right back. I need to go do something. Okay, I'm back. All the way. Okay. Yeah, they'll probably get protected, but that's normal.
Very well.
He'd accepted his fate. This already hadn't been his week of avoiding embarrassment-wise. What was one more egg on the face? When you reached the door, you rang the obscured bell. After only a minute, it flew open. There was your Moss, wearing her new shorter haircut and beaming with expectation. She wasn't disappointed by what she saw. Pam! Jules is here! She shouted the announcement down the side hall before speaking to you face to face. Hello, please come in. You were ushered inside just like that. Ma kicked the door shut behind you all with the back of her heel as Mom ambled along into the entryway.
Hello.
We've got a real party today. Mom was looking chipper with the retired English professor outfit she had on. We're gonna hug. 4 arms wrapped around you in response. You squished together in a Hunt family love fest. You were never old enough for them to stop fawning over you. All the hugs. I'm so happy to see you.
Thanks.
Hi there, kiddo. Thanks for taking the time to swing by. Yes, welcome home, sweetie, and hello to you too. Mom pointed her face directly towards Baxter. He got the full force of her cheer. It's a surprise Jules found someone they wanted to bring home. I imagine they'd spend the time with the usual faces. It's such a short trip.
That's fantastic.
But it's not a bad thing. It's hopefully they're meeting new friends. They don't recognize them. Yes. My name is Noelani, and I'm Pamela. Nice to meet you. An awkward chuckle came from Baxter. They didn't recognize him. Sure, he lost his iconic sense of style, but they were plenty recognizable. Baxter isn't celeb. But honestly, how much time did they spend with him? He spent most of the time with me, or Jules. We have in fact met before, Jules and I, as well as myself and both of you. My name is Baxter Ward. I visited Sunset Bird 5 years ago as a tourist. I stayed in a rental on this very street. Your mom's familiar welcoming grins flattened right out. Their joy evaporated like an ice cube left in the parking lot during the height of a California summer. I love that description. I see you remember me. Baxter ran a finger along the inside edge of his collar, leaving it hooked in at the center. Despite his bold claim from before that he wasn't intending to hide, Baxter unconsciously lingered farther away from your mom's than you did, positioned you as a block between him and them. So, hiding, basically. It was so sad, but also extremely cute. However, Baxter didn't run or fight in the midst of this crisis. He embraced it.
Understandable.
I'm certain I must have come across as uncaring and unreliable at that time, but I assure you I'm relatively less immature than I used to be. Not the most flattering character assessment, but an honest one. To say your mothers weren't impressed would be an understatement. Their stony expressions didn't so much as twitch. I forgave him for what happened. Thank you for that, Jules. I think that's the most important thing for the moms. You have every right to be aware of me being here with your child again, and you can take as long as you need to come to terms with it. Sure was difficult to remain mad at someone so earnest. You couldn't manage it. Slowly, life returned to the 2 statues that had been erected in front of you.
Well,
Your gracious smile elected to change the subject there. How about we catch up? We missed quite a lot, for both of you. Yeah, you should tell them about yourself, Baxter.
Certainly.
To start, I'll say that I work as a wedding planner. Mainly, I also plan events for certain nonprofit organizations when I can. Though that's at such a low rate, it's only pro bono. Nothing I could make a living out of. Huh. That was news to all of you. He never mentioned doing anything outside of weddings. Baxter crossed his arms protectively and pointedly looked away from you. That was one matter even he was shy about. Dean Baxter gotten into volunteer work after all. That's right. That's nice. Your meddlesome parents homed in on Baxter like mother hens introduced to a brand new chick. Interesting. I would have pegged you as a love guru. Oh, I'm not. Even so, wedding planning is such a lovely career. How did that happen? It suited me in many ways. Truthfully, it was planning a wedding that caused Jules and I to meet again. Ma shot a finger towards Baxter and gasped.
fun.
You were working on Jude and Scott's wedding. That's correct. It was the gig of a lifetime. Oh, darn it. I just realized if he does other kinds of events, he could have planned a whole party for our wedding anniversary a few weeks ago. Mom and Mom were having bustles of fun by then. Baxter playfully batted their jokes and teases.
That's wonderful.
Happy belated anniversary. And as always next year, after all, I'm going to be around. At that moment, he glanced at you. Seriousness replaced his casual smile. There are no deadlines anymore. It was that look the way he was when he saw you that really sold Baxter for your mom. And I should mention Jules is staying at my apartment. I can give you the address. That revelation your parents newly surprised. Just when they'd relaxed, Baxter Ward managed to knock them off their balance again.
What?
What? Since Jude and Scott are on their honeymoon, I would have been on my own. Baxter was nice enough to let me come over to his place instead. The pair of wives focused on each other doing their mom thing where they came to a decision without having to talk about it out loud. It hit you that you were able to do that yourself with Baxter a minute ago. Wow. Ultimately, they smiled gently over the both of you. That made you smile too. You never doubted that your parents could find it in their hearts to accept how Mr. Ward unexpectedly waltzed into your life once more. They trusted your judgment, plus from their real grown-up perspective, Baxter was practically still a baby back when his solution to problems was avoiding them. They didn't have reservations on getting to know him again now, and you got right to that. Both you and Baxter worked together to recount your wedding planning adventures. Going over the entire story nicely illustrated the absolute week you'd had, and it wasn't even 7 days. Mom and Ma went on an emotional roller coaster, visibly distraught when you described how cold Baxter was originally, and cheering when he explained the moment you officially reconnected, as if they hadn't already known how it ended. You got to hear what they'd been up to lately as well. It was the same old for them, which is exactly how they liked it. But as it got later in the day, you ran out of time. There was another meetup still to have. Your mom simply appreciated that you stopped by at all and wished you well seeing your new friend. They promised to tell Mr. Holden you said hi when he got back from work. Baxter and you said goodbye, then headed off to the bar. Baxter brought the car to a stop in a parking lot wedged between skyscrapers. You'd arrived at the theatrical bar you'd attended years ago. Inside, you were ushered through the lobby into the main room by an usher. The sight of it was as dazzling as your starry-eyed recollection. Smooth jazz backed the scene, played by a live band. Some members looked as if they might be the same from before. The bartender was definitely someone new. That was for the best, since you weren't sitting at the bar. Instead, you snagged a booth with enough room for a party of 3 and were passed an appropriate number of drink menus. It was still a bit early to start drinking, but you guessed right then that it wasn't going to stop Baxter. Only when the host was finished and gone did Baxter take out his phone. I'll let them know we've arrived. Okay. Baxter grinned playfully, buoyed by your own positivity, and put the phone away. His attention was set on you, even if the topic wasn't.
You know.
Xavier is a delightful person. That's nice. You have to imagine a person would be required to be a particularly pleasant and thoughtful individual to build up even a tenuous friendship with someone as closed off as Baxter. One thing you could already give Xavier, regardless of whatever else, was that they saved your boyfriend from being entirely alone before you found him again. You were grateful for it. Xavier strolled through the doors shortly after a set of waters were placed down around the table. Nice. Nice and comfy. They ditched the apron that day, which made perfect sense since you were meeting up casually outside of their place of employment. Though it suited them so well, it was a staple part of their look. If Xavier had worn it out, you bet strangers would have accepted it as an entirely correct anyway. Your eyes met across the open space of the bar. Baxter stood to welcome them. Xavier wasted no time linking up. Good evening. He held his hand straight out for a shake. Xavier went with it, giggling.
Always a pleasure.
Hi, Baxter and Jules. Thanks for finding the time to see me after all.
Oh, yes.
Of course, Xavier. Of course. You and Baxter sat side by side, and he rejoined you there while Xavier slid into the opposite bench. Fantastic to see you again. They shot you a grin and skipped up the third and final menu.
Well,
Are you ordering anything? I am. Whoops. Sorry. I want a martini. It suits the atmosphere of this space. It is appropriate. Resting his arms in front of him, Baxter draped himself dramatically over the table. And finally, I can have a real Bellini. Figured. Let's go with alcohol. I personally don't drink, but that's me. That's not the character. Hard cider, red wine, white wine, champagne, beer, gin, vodka, martini, rum cola, whiskey sour, Bloody Mary, pina colada, citrus sunshine cocktail, Bellini, margarita. Let's go with hard cider. The early hour wasn't going to stop you either. You were on vacation for real at that point. Since everyone was decided, the order was placed as soon as the waiter came by. He jotted down the request, collected the menus, and promised to be back shortly. Then, the second he was out of earshot, Xavier shot a pinning stare at the couple sitting snugly across from them. So? You knew where this was going. Unlike Baxter, who would gleefully avoid personal questions, Xavier was nothing if not persistent when it came to getting the specifics. The decorators did have an eye for details. Are you going to explain what kind of dynamic you have going on? To pick back up what I said over the phone, you were acting like Jules was a co-worker, and now they are staying at your place. I do not understand. Baxter threaded his fingers together while leaning forward. He grinned cordially. This challenge didn't faze him any longer. With as much audacity as someone who could ask a baker to make a wedding cake with 3 days' notice, your good friend gave an apologetic answer.
Honestly,
It seems I was being dramatic. We will continue spending time together after all. Xavier matched his squint, pairing that with an exaggeratedly neighborly smile.
What's the dynamic
I could
here?
see that clearly, but what was happening to begin with? Well, the sad situation. Speaking solemnly, though through pained pauses, he went over how you met, how you parted, how you were unbelievably reunited, and how difficult that reunion originally was. Baxter didn't interrupt to defend himself when you expressed how you felt going through the past days. He merely listened. Swirling the longest strands of hair, Xavier found the whole of the story much easier to grasp than they had only hearing the end.
To be honest,
I'm not surprised in the slightest. They know Baxter. As fast as things were when you stopped by the bakery, I always assumed if you stopped having quiet-based reasons to visit, you never would have spoken to me again. Looks like I was right on that assessment. Baxter's gaze dropped. He couldn't help it. Developing closer ties could never make him ashamed, no matter how odd the circumstances. Doing the inverse, however, might always remain a source of guilt for him.
I apologize.
It's not your fault. I have no talent for maintaining relationships that aren't entirely unavoidable, and sometimes not even then. I get it. Trust is always a work in progress, right? I'd say we would have become actual friends eventually, but Jules giving you a push can speed that right along. Baxter looked at his face at that, speaking softly, but Xavier was a nice person. Yes, I think so too. Drinks arrived shortly. Your little group mutually took that as a closing to the interrogation of Baxter Ward and Jules Hunt. After serving the order, the waiter left once more, saying to call him if you needed anything else. Xavier and Baxter put a pause on any future discussion to sample their stuff. By their delighted mms and hms of the flavor, it sounded like the bar was a hit with both. Though Baxter would probably appreciate any alcohol over the mocktail he'd gotten the last time he'd been here. Neither of us were at a drinking age at that point. Yours was delicious too. The three of you stayed quiet until Xavier chimed in with the next major topic of this meetup, Jude and Scott Adams' wedding. How'd the day go?
Perfect.
It went off without a hitch. They're a wonderfully stable couple.
woohoo!
They whistled. The odds were beat, that was for certain. By all accounts, you should have been informing Xavier how the last-minute preparations ended in disaster. Yes, and your cake got rave reviews from the guests, of course. Of course!
Phew!
I could sleep easy knowing I made a cake for a crowd who enjoyed it, and for a couple who should actually be getting married. I'm happy for them. Some of these jobs... Shivers ran through Xavier's body. I feel like I'm making a macabrely beautiful feast to celebrate a horrible mistake. Baxter chuckled at his colleague, his fellow in creating matrimonial bliss, and his match and insight for one the happiest day of someone's life, if not quite so happy. While I tend to believe in every pair who comes through my office, it is difficult to avoid the occasional wallow in cynicism. The wedding industrial complex will do that to you.
Of course.
Or it would have if I hadn't already possessed a streak of pessimism when it came to relationships lasting. We've gone down that track.
Mm-hmm.
Xavier's manicured lashes fluttered as they rested against the back of the booth. They sighed in relief. Relaxing time was over after 1 minute, and they tilted forward again. Now assured their efforts weren't in vain, Xavier could indulge in juicier ponderings. Hey, what bakery made that groom's cake? I admit I took a peek at what was under the cover when I dropped my own off. It was well designed. Xavier actually jumped up in their seat. What? They settled down and gingerly patted their coiffed hair, making sure it was still in one place. Surprises after surprises. You're squishy under that stiff suit of yours, Baxter.
Come on.
I said that is actually a surprise. They giggled, the sound akin to the bell on Slake's front door. True, that part isn't. You and Jules baking a cake is. Is it? You might be surprised. Don't you recall it wasn't the first time we've been in a similar squeeze?
Oh!
Wait, you're right. Those mystery cupcakes. From that auspicious start, you and Baxter told more stories from the wedding. Eventually, it transitioned into Baxter sharing especially memorable moments from other jobs he'd worked on. Some highlighted real-life potential pitfalls you could work to avoid if you ever got married, while others were one-in-a-million debacles. The most unbelievable story was of a particular orchard-set wedding. A ceremony had been prepared with flowers, a walkway, seating, and a bespoke wooden arch at the end. As the planner who's doing a final survey primed for the guests to arrive when an out-of-control truck with a back end full of apples barreled straight through. Baxter stressed that the driver was fine when he managed to come to a stop, and the couple was still married, albeit in a much simpler arrangement, so no real harm was done. However, Baxter distinctly recalled the comedic surrealness of it. Seeing a completed ceremony, the fruit of weeks of work, and then having it flattened to the ground in the blink of an eye was something he never expected or hoped to experience. But for all the misery of the moment, he did confess that the debacle made for a great mood setter going forward. He shared the memory with every couple he'd worked with since to help put their own struggles into perspective. Good idea. That's smart. It warmed your heart seeing Baxter so at ease. Now the carefully maintained distance remained between him and Xavier, or him and you. There was no sadness or sense of loss when it came time to part ways. After all, this didn't have to be final. You had the power to reach out again if you wanted. The bill was split and that got paid before saying goodbye to the baker. With a cheery wave and a grin, Xavier left for home. It was interesting to speak to them more casually, but you still needed to get to know them better. The music was good and the drinks weren't done, so you and Baxter were in no rush to leave yourselves. Light conversation was made. Thank you for keeping me company all this time. Thank you for coming to see my moms. I was happy to see them. It's been too long, even though it hasn't been long at all. Barely a whole month. He tapped a finger against his glass, watching you and smiling sweetly.
I get it.
I can understand why their presence would be missed. Your family members are lovely people. Baxter was so nice about your moms and big sis. That was something he deeply appreciated. Your family meant a lot to you. But you could forget the offhanded way he noted his own parents and his list of people he'd lost contact with. Baxter, I'm worried about what you said when you mentioned your mom and dad. Is that alright to talk about?
Oh.
Baxter's fingers, which were gingerly wrapped around a champagne glass, twitched. That is fine. He placed the cup down with a clink. You're my partner after all. You're not allowed to know details about my mysterious, opaque life. Baxter might have been able to form quotes as glibly as ever, but you hadn't missed the dullness in his eyes. To start, I haven't spoken to my parents in a few years now. That's what I meant when I included them in the list of relationships I haven't maintained. So they weren't talking at all? He frowned. Even if making new ties seemed impossible to him, what would make Baxter cut off the family he'd always known? Those questions stayed within the confines of your head. This wasn't the time to interrupt. He felt your sharp reaction and gave a tight smile. Don't worry, it isn't a painful topic for me exactly. Mostly I find it disappointing, frustrating, certainly awkward. Shifting his seat, Baxter leaned on his elbow and angled his body towards you. Before I cause too much concern, they've never done anything to intentionally harm me. My parents have always cared for my well-being. And I can't deny how much they've done for me. All the opportunities and advantages I had because I provided them. Gave me the best I knew how, and... Baxter cut himself off, raising one hand and using the other to pinch the brow of his nose. He was thoroughly unimpressed with his own ramblings. This is not as smooth as I might be making it sound. What a novelty it would be if I could speak favorably of my own family. Can you imagine? That's not the case, however. Dark brown eyes stared into yours, as serious and unmovable as they were whenever he demanded the listener to grasp the depth of the chasm between him and them. What I'm trying to say is that my parents are, on the whole, good to me, and they do love me as their child whom they raised for nearly 2 decades. Just as I still feel compelled to give them credit for the minimum, I'm certain they're telling their acquaintances endless excuses for why I'm so distant and unagreeable with them. They haven't given up on me in their own way.
But
All that does not make them good people. I can assure you that because they are not good people, I'm merely a rare exception to the unpleasantness. My parents are selfish, they're sheltered, even as adults. For example, you, Jules Hunt, are, well, my absolute ideal. I'm in love with you. The warmth of Baxter's voice when he described you burned into a bitter ash. But I doubt they could understand,
I swear.
based on quite a colorful variety of factors. Baxter suddenly raised his voice and arms, almost knocking over his own beloved Bellini. And their nonsense priorities and concerns are what my parents expected from me. Baxter quieted down again quick. He was in public, and you weren't the person you wanted to be shouting at anyway. After straightening out his jacket, Baxter crossed his legs under the table.
How wonderful.
How ironic that I could finally see the silver lining of my lifelong struggles thanks to them. If I never realized how poor my connections were, or if I never cared that my relationships were nothing more than associations based on conveniences, maybe I'd have been who they wanted. Regardless, I'm not their ideal son. They're not my preferred company either, and I don't expect you to ever meet my family. That's honestly for the better. Interesting. So it's not that they're bad to him. He's just realized they're not good people, and he made the choice to stop associating with them. I repeated exactly what he said, didn't I? I get it. Baxter barely mentioned his parents 5 years ago when they were closer. Still, it wasn't nothing. You'd given small crumbs of insight into the dynamic when you knew him before, and it had bothered you ever since. When you were teens, Baxter laughed off every concerning line about his family. Knowing how the story ended changed the way he saw those early chapters. Do you remember when we talked about how we got along with our families before? You'd taken him by surprise this time. He raised a brow. Back when we went to the hotel, you asked about my family and I asked about yours. You said something about how there were problems, and they'd really be problems if your parents weren't your parents. Yes, I think I did say something along those lines. It was so silly back then. Imagining myself as not their son and not someone they loved seemed meaningless at the time. They did love me, and that's what mattered. Of course, it's not always enough, is it? If I wasn't theirs, either through birth or adoption, if I was someone else's son, they would hate me. I know I'm foolish on many counts. It took me a long time to realize that. Them being hypocritical shouldn't reassure me the way it did. Baxter Ward could have as many shortcomings or problems as he did, and it'd be fine because it was different in that case. There were reasons, can't you see? But they couldn't see that other people deserved the same kind of understanding, and that some things weren't problems in the first place. Mr. and Mrs. Ward were not people you needed to build up a rapport with, and that was more than certain. No kid should have parents who make them miserable. Agreed.
Maybe.
Who knows? Maybe one day I'll cobble together a family of sorts of my own. I've stopped running away whenever I get close to another person. That's the first step. We're gonna put an arm around him. Baxter glanced from your hand to your face, amazed. You gripped him like you would fall off a cliff if you ever let go. Every fiber of your being was working towards a single goal, conveying to Baxter that you were there and you would be as long as he wanted you to be. Baxter whispered gently, and you knew the sentiment got through.
That's sweet.
You were very kind. Though, rest assured, I'm not as heartbroken over my lack of familial bonds as you would be if you became estranged with yours. There wasn't much to lose. While I could wish it was different, it never has been. I'd only be theorizing about pointless what-ifs. And with the circumstances I have, not interacting with my parents remains preferable over the stress that came with having them around.
Honestly.
I'm happier with the way my life is right now than I have been at any other time. I can stand on my own 2 feet. I understand myself better. I have friends. I have you again. So I would hope you can be glad for how far I've come, rather than sad that there were hurdles to overcome. Managing a smile, you gave him an answer from the heart. I will, then. I'm proud of you, Baxter. And besides, now he's got 2 moms. Well, he will. Even better still. For a moment you connected with one another, genuinely, sincerely, and wholly. That wasn't until his ever-familiar Cheshire Cat grin took center stage.
So,
At the very least, I can be grateful I don't have the thick-headed parents the bartender and diva were saddled with. Despite yourself, you laughed. That was a completely unexpected reference. Baxter used the opening to continue reminiscing about what happened the day he'd invited you out for drinks so long ago. It was intentional. He didn't want to linger on the heavy topic of his family, but it wasn't forced. Baxter didn't have to pretend he was doing well. It was true. He could carry on with his head held high, and you'd get to be there from then on. It was something to be glad about. Soon, the time to move forward did arrive. There were other adventures to be had. You and Baxter hopped in his car once again, and the bar disappeared behind you. Neither of you had eaten since that morning. Your grumbly stomachs decided that you'd eat at one of the nearby restaurants rather than going to the apartment to cook. When you were done with yet another stop and back in the car, it was well into the night. You'd been away from home for at least 12 hours. One might have thought after frantically finishing a wedding the day after that would be comparably less jam-packed. Nope. It had been your 5th or 6th subsequent day of squeezing in every last minute of the day for all it was worth. You couldn't keep track anymore of how long you'd been tossed about by this whirlwind of activity. Your charming company in the flurry didn't bat an eye at the pace. In fact, it hadn't batched a hair out of place on his perfectly styled head. The darkness of the world and the lateness of the hour meant Mr. Ward had reached his height of energy. Under those circumstances, when Baxter offered up a new proposition.
Does that sound all
What would you
right?
say about going dancing with me? What? He elaborated. I spent the whole of the wedding working, if you recall. Even though we stole a little time after the event had finished, that was hardly comparable to having a night out together. Especially when you consider the, circumstances that lingered between us then. We can't forget that you'll be leaving soon, and I'll have to start new client work shortly. So why not take advantage of the moment we have together now? Here you had been thinking you'd already made the most of the day. Apparently Baxter considered your gallivanting around two towns to be just the lead up to a yet-to-come grand finale. I get that, but where could we go without signing up for it ahead of time? And actually, would something even be open this late anyway? That gaping hole in the master plan couldn't fluster Baxter, as expected. I know a place. Of course he would. Now, it wouldn't be as attractive of a location as the Adams affair, however. It's entirely functional for our purposes. To add to the effect, we could visit the apartment and change into something more appropriate. Don't you think it's a shame I haven't gotten a single chance to wear a true suit yet? This standard everyday look doesn't have the same impact. The car stopped at a red light and Baxter made the most of that opportunity as well, turning his head to face you directly. His expression was hopeful. It could be our first real date. And at least the first for our second time being together. That would be nice.
Thank you.
He chirped sweetly. But when his eyes went back to the road, he was smirking deviously. Baxter channeled his growing energy into a taut grip on the wheel. Finally, I have a partner I can dance with whenever we wish to. The light turned green and he hit the gas. Your back pressed into the seat from the rapid change of momentum. There would be no rest for the wicked. It all made you snicker. His enthusiasm never failed to delight. You arrived at the apartment building, went straight up to Baxter's floor, and through the front door of his place. Without needing to reiterate the latest scheme, you and Baxter split off into your respective rooms to get fancy. You... bit nicer than your norm. Considering the limitations, your packing preparations had paid off. You had clothing for a variety of situations, including one such as this. Digging hastily, you found what you needed in your suitcase and shook out any wrinkles that might have been hiding there. It was ready to go. When you were dressed, you found Baxter already waiting in the living room. He lifted his head and a big smile pulled across his face. Of course, he would know how to put on a suit in a flash. Baxter was dolled up in a sleek and stylish brown suit that highlighted his eyes rather than trying to distract from them, and tonight they looked clearer than ever. The longer you stood there, the more his expression warmed fondly. He almost couldn't believe that you were willingly there for him. Just take a moment to admire the suit. I knew it. Crossing your arms, your sudden snickering confused Baxter completely. His brows pinched and he glanced around the room, finding nothing of note. Knew what? That you were gonna outdress me. You gestured at your nice clothes and then at his fancy suit. His lips parted, and then there was a snort that left Baxter ducking his head away from you. Ah, I see. Baxter's voice strained in an attempt to breeze through this conversation seriously, but between that and the way he tried covering his mouth, his amusement was too noticeable to miss. Luckily, I don't care if we're a mismatch. Is that so? Mm-hmm. I like us just how we are. Me too. Very much. Regaining his composure, Baxter finally apprised your outfit, and his demeanor grew gentle.
Perfect.
And for what it's worth, I think your ensemble tonight is a perfect fit. Didn't expect a brown suit for you, but not in a bad way. I know what you mean. I found it's an exemplary piece to wear when I want to step outside the lens of black tie formal. He idly adjusted the cuffs on his suit jacket. Your eyes followed that movement. I've been told that the set is an attention grabber. Automatically, he glanced up and caught the gentle curve of his smile.
So,
Shall we go? I'm ready if you are. Perfect, off we go. On that note, the two of you left the apartment behind and gallivanted off into the city. It was exhilarating to run off with little worry to who knew where with Baxter Ward by your side. You felt all of 18 years old again, and you had no idea until just now how deeply you missed this. The engine cut off and Baxter's latest mystery location was unidentifiable. Closing the car door, all you could see was a small empty lot and the few street lamps keeping it lit. This lot sat behind a huge building, but from this spot you had no way of knowing what the inside could be. The back was entirely non-distinct, just an imposing white wall. Here we are? Yes, there's a door ahead. Baxter led you away from the car and towards the back door you had missed entirely in the shadows. He opened it with little effort and slipped inside. Perplexed, he stood there and stared into the dark void Baxter disappeared into.
Come on.
Right this way. Could kind of see his arm in the doorway, and Baxter motioned for you to follow. You had anticipated being surprised by where he was taking you, but this was way more unusual than even his usual fare. Following inside, you struggled to see anything without the tiny rays of light filtering through the doorway. Held my hand, gently took your hand in his, and the door fell shut. No explanations were offered. Instead, Baxter acted under the assumption that you'd blindly come with him. And he was right. Baxter went ahead with confident steps. You trusted him enough to believe this wasn't a mistake. Wherever the two of you were, he at least knew the pitch-black hallway. He found precisely where to reach to open another door. In the new black void, you caught a faint echo of your own footsteps stopping by his side. Next to you, the door felt like glass under your fingertips. Baxter lightly squeezed you, and then he let go. Wait here, please. I'll get the lights. There was something else to do. Listening closely, you could hear Baxter's steps bounce around the presumed open space as he strolled ahead. He moved further and further away until you heard the loud click of multiple switches being flipped. Several rows of lights zapped on it in succession. The lights flashed to their full brightness and blinded you. Shielding your face, you were aware of Baxter moving in your direction.
I'm sorry.
I should have warned you. Are you alright? Squinting, your blurry sight gradually adjusted. You finally got an idea of where you were. A big, nearly empty room with a shiny tiled floor. It was strange. Something was familiar about the picture. Almost like you'd seen this room before. That was it! You had seen it before. Specifically in the photos Scott and Jude sent before their wedding. This must have been where they practiced with Baxter. Ha! I thought it was a place to practice dancing. It seemed like that sort of place. Is this your work building? Correct. Baxter revealed the ring of keys hooked around his finger and spun it, his expression impish. If we're being technical, we're long closed for the I happen to have keys. Wow. This is simply incredible. I'm allowed to visit at any time, even when customers are not.
Of course.
What if I need access to a file? What if I need to access a file in the office? Weddings, as you know, are a juggling act of many moving pieces. The difficulty would only increase if the work fell exclusively within a window of set hours. Yeah. A single wedding was chaotic enough, but buying them as a career could easily be more than a full-time job. You'd have to be ready to tackle needs and demands whenever they hit. Exactly, the higher powers that be understand we do what we must. They come and go from the building as I please.
Honestly.
Though bringing a date here is not entirely an expected reason for coming. Personally, I'd say it still counts as job adjacent. You're helping me maintain my professional dancing form. The owners are highly understanding.
See?
And excuses are only necessary if we're caught, which might not even happen. Mischief twinkled in his eyes. He seemed so certain in his abilities that you had to believe Baxter would never be taken to task for the stunt. There was no way you could have predicted this situation if you tried. Baxter Ward was an enigma.
Excellent.
One moment, please. Holding up a single digit, Baxter politely dipped his head and then went to the counter by the far wall. He was messing with something there, but you couldn't tell what while he walked to the center of the room. Turning on music, I think. Soon you'd have a dance together. Very lost in thought and matching his song, you tapped your foot and then spun on your toes. A few snickers bubbled up from the silliness. Today you're dusting off your skills. Admittedly, you hadn't done this for quite a while. A few things might be hard, you imagine, but overall you remain confident in your abilities. Music began playing and the room hummed along with Baxter placed a hand across his heart. I knew he was turning on music. What's the point of dancing without music?
You know.
As you know, I enjoy a nice waltz around the room. However, I'm not a one-trick pony, and I'm not selfish enough to only want to stick with my expertise. Is there any particular style you prefer? I could teach you anything you have in mind to the best of my ability, or vice versa if you know better. Honestly, I'd love to have a waltz. Baxter's face brightened gloriously.
Gladly.
I'd love nothing more. With that, Baxter Baxter swapped through the and waltzed out. Then he slipped through. Against each other, but you wouldn't want anything different. Then the music shifted. The conclusion of the current song was on the horizon, and you knew this was going to be the conclusion. Baxter dipping me. Two of you turned down, and in an instant, Baxter's touch shifted to firmly hold your waist. He then dipped you enough that you even dared to let the foot off the floor. Your eyes stayed locked on one another. Your breathing was heavy. The music's end left you both suspended in the silence. And you kissed. The inches could have been miles, but that wouldn't have changed a thing. Both of you fervently closed the distance, meeting in the middle. Baxter's lips rapturously pressed into yours, and you lightly touched his neck and his shoulders as you deepened the kiss. You hoped that you would have the chance to witness Baxter this happy again 1,000,000 times more. That was fun. Baxter didn't try to hide his pleased reaction, and you enjoyed every second of his carefree delight.
I love it.
It was exquisite.
Bravo.
You danced beautifully, Jules. You knew it was time to let go of Baxter, but you really didn't want to, and he also struggled with the same dilemma. It didn't help that the room felt strangely different now that the music was off. There was so much calm after a storm, even if it was a good kind of storm. Sliding backwards, Baxter made sure there was enough room and then gave you a grand bow. He stared up at you from between the strands of his bangs before standing straight again. Might I get you a drink after so much exertion? Huh? Scratching the top of your head, you weren't sure how Baxter was going to accomplish that. He answered your confusion with a smirk. It's a water cooler, right at the back. Yes, I did notice that. It's right there. You can see the corner. Didn't even need to check. Baxter nudged his head for something past his shoulder. Leaning, you peeked past him and spied it instantly. Oh! Yeah, water would be great. His lips pressed into a sweet smile and then Baxter turned on his heel.
I can do that.
2 waters coming up. See, there it is. I had noticed that earlier. Baxter started to the water cooler and fetched you both something to drink. A minute later, he passed you a full cup of water. He tilted his head back to swallow a large sip. He brought the cup down again, and he combed his swoop of bangs to his side with his other hand. No, we could continue standing here, but there's somewhere better we can rest our feet. Would you care to follow me? Why not?
Lovely.
Wonderful. Baxter casually dropped the remote off at the counter and shut down the music system completely. Then against the glass door, you waited for him to finish. Then you left that room behind and traveled down a different hallway. Taking your drinks for the trip, Baxter brought you to a much more familiar spot. He swung the door open with extra confidence. Welcome back to my office, Jules. Make yourself at home. Oh, is something wrong? No, it's just I kind of thought I'd never see this place again. Ah, that was certainly a possibility. Baxter flicked a hand as he walked and talked. He went straight for the couch and settled down on it. He immediately got comfortable by stretching his legs, swinging his arm along the back. The whole time, his gaze rested on you. We're gonna sit next to him, duh! Lowering into the cushion, you situated Baxter's arm under your head. It was nice. Baxter cozied closer to your side, and he hummed happily as he did it, too. The re-establishment of warmth between the two of you gave you goosebumps. I never get to do this. Relaxing you even further, Baxter idly ran his free hand along the purple fabric. How strange, being on this side of the room. Yeah. Hey, if you got married, do you think you would plan it yourself or hire a different planner? If you had expected he'd need at least a second to think, or at least react to the sudden inquiry, where Baxter shot out an instant response. Unless someone was intending to wed my cold dead body, no other planner would have a say in my own wedding. blinking, you absorbed that dramatic answer and then erupted into a fit of laughter. Baxter delivered it so seriously, but your reaction softened his expression. I'm happy you found that so amusing. He crossed his legs and gradually lost his polite demeanor for a coy one. So, with that said, why would you ask me, Jules? Because maybe we're in a wedding planning office, wise guy? He dramatically glanced up and down before turning his attention to you. Who would have guessed that? Anyone, Baxter. Anyone who doesn't have ulterior motives.
Oh?
Ulterior motives? I have none. I won't no segment of you either. Not at all. That's what I thought. Baxter plucked the cup he brought with him off the table and took another sip. Slowly he lowered it and let out a wistful sigh. Thanks for indulging me tonight, Jules. This has been the most fun I've had in I don't know how long.
To be honest,
I do know now that I want to dance again outside of work. For myself. I'm sorry for brushing you off about this topic before. In a way, I fell out of love with that passion. It became tedious and unsatisfying to do it with complete strangers, and I didn't have enough hours in a day to dedicate to a long-term competitive partner any longer. But perhaps I should have tried harder not to give it up entirely. Baxter leaned in an elbow on the arm of the chair and rested his cheek against his knuckles. His mouth twitched. How embarrassing. If my choice of hobby revolved around having a serious and understanding relationship with someone else. The precise matter I've had a lifelong struggle to obtain. I don't think my 8-year-old self was trying to make a statement when he decided this activity was worth pursuing, but still, it's quite fitting, I miss being able to dance with you. The harsh crease of his brow softened considerably. He held your gaze for a prolonged moment.
I missed you.
I missed it too. After all of that. So an unshakable thrill being alone with him in the middle of the night. Especially with the way Baxter was looking at you. His irises were twin embers just beginning to spark before everything around them was set aflame. You're not a shy man, are you, Baxter Ward? A smolder in his eyes crept across the rest of his features, heat curling the ends of his lips. He was definitely hoping you might say something like that. No, I wouldn't describe myself that way.
Excited.
Now, why would you ask about something like that? I'm pretty sure you figured it out. With a laugh, Baxter uncrossed his legs. Then he stopped chuckling and silently brought his face nearer. Smooch time. Both you and Baxter gladly closed the limited distance that remained until there was none. There was no more uncertainty. The emotional static that had remained a constant background noise ever since meeting Baxter again one summer evening had settled into place. The conflicting frequencies came together to form a rhythmic vibration so in tune a person could dance to it. It was amazing, and it was different. When you were teenagers, Baxter's touch was driven by the reckless passion of someone who couldn't wait. Kissing him now held the intensity of someone who had been waiting for a long time. But despite him prior that you and Baxter were sitting alone together in his office, silently locked in an embrace. Something that shouldn't have been more than a passing daydream was your current reality. Baxter wasn't supposed to be there, or he was since it was his place, but you weren't supposed to be where he was, and even if you were, you weren't meant to be close to him. You've never met a man more committed to the concept of keeping people at arm's length in your entire life. Yet now you've gotten as near to him as physically possible, his arms were around you. And rather than running away, Baxter wanted more. He hooked one of his long legs over your lap, before brazenly hefting himself over to be fully in front of you. Baxter knocked one of the decorative pillows to the floor in the process. Oh! You couldn't have expected anything less from Baxter Ward. Baxter's bangs hung down and brushed your forehead. His breath warmed your cheeks. Does this suit you? Yeah, that works. Baxter was taller than you. It wasn't as if you weren't aware of that before, but you still never felt the difference in height more keenly.
Excellent.
Baxter crushed his lips into yours again. He pressed you deep against the plush backing of the couch. Your stomach dipped and he clasped his shoulders for support. For a few seconds you managed to get your hands moving again. They roamed over his chest, cupped his narrow sides through his posing. Baxter hummed pleasantly and he raked a hand up along your leg. It started in a straight line, but curved just barely so it was touching your inner thigh.
Gorgeous.
You have nice legs. The heat of that was so great it went past burning to being entirely numbing, like being seared by a bright white flame. It made you shiver. Smacked his butt. Kissed Mo on his neck. With the way Baxter was hanging over you, you only needed to lean forward to fit under his chin. There, you left a feather-like kiss perfectly against where the little beauty mark was. You felt the spark you'd set off in him. Baxter crushed the cushions behind you. It wasn't the first time you'd done that, but that was exactly the point. Your touch, your feelings, all of it was more intimate now, and Baxter could feel it.
You're incredible.
You remembered, he murmured breathlessly, more than a little flushed. Pleased with his reaction, and certainly enjoying it in your own right, you had continued from there to leave kisses along the length of his neck. Went as low as you could manage with his shirt in the way. Being pressed against him, you took in Baxter's cologne with every rapid inhale. Scents sure to have a long-lasting impact on someone's mind. They lingered in ways different, but no less powerful than sights or sounds. And right then, that sense was rousing old memories of Baxter. Wrapping his shirt around your shoulders to keep out the evening breeze, it was similar but not the same. Just like the situation you found yourself in was different from the scene you were reflecting on. Before, Baxter's cologne was almost old-fashioned in how perfumed and heavy the smell was. These floral notes were fresher, sharper, and there was an undercurrent of spice. A mature scent for a gentleman, of sorts. Still with your face against his neck, you reached up to grasp the handful of what you knew to be dyed black hair. Another quiver shoved Baxter's body. He curled himself around you further, seeking the warmth. His lips brushed against the tip of your ear. Baxter kissed it gently. Two of you were woven together like the threads of a rope. Loosen the tie. Your hands made their way to the top button along his neck. Baxter made unwavering eye contact, like it was a casual you passing him in the salt. He didn't stop pulling on the tie. Yet you doubted he was saying so pretty because it was an act that didn't mean much to him. Baxter's confidence could be shaken and boundaries could be crossed, but with you, this simply wasn't that. Would you be okay if I wrinkled your shirt?
Gladly.
Yes, feel free. I wouldn't care if you tore holes in it. The grin played on his face as the taut tie finally began to give way. I'll be careful not to ruin it, anyway. How thoughtful. Amused, Baxter slipped the jacket off his he managed to remove it across the nearby table without bumping your arms once. I said it before and I'll say it again. That's a great view.
Thank you.
I appreciate things. That was the goal.
Hmm?
Khaki, but memories flashed inside your head before you'd even chosen to remember them. Pulling Baxter into a dark hotel room at a mountain lodge, the second extra room Baxter reserved just in case he ended up finding someone to go with him on his trip within a trip. Khaki. It was a khaki shirt, Baxter. That's what I just said. Semantics. Besides, that's as close as it's going to get. I will still refuse to wear khaki for the rest of my life. That is a promise. You laughed. But does that mean you got rid of it?
No.
I simply stuck it in a drawer and never put it on again. It remains my stolen property to this day. Handsome, charming, funny, and precious. A real quadruple threat. Finally, Baxter glanced down to take stock of his disheveled self. He lodged a complaint, or rather a query. Honestly, should I even leave the shirt on at all? It's in a fairly sorry state, and you've seen me more than topless before. Are you gonna...
Certainly.
See with anything else, Baxter. I'm torn. Do I really want to snack his butt? Yeah. pulled the top of the couch. Fall off you with how much he was shaking. If that is a punishment, it's going to have the opposite effect than intended. I'm not Stretch. You gave him another squeeze down there. He was asking for it after all. The small sweet bites at your lower lips. You slipped your arms around his back. Baxter let that pull him in. He lowered his body again, closer than before, and your flesh against each other. He really was being bad. While Baxter's shamelessness was unimpeachable, he was the first to pull back. Perhaps being in his own place of work made it too hard to ignore the nagging voice in his head that told him to behave. Thank you, Jules. I hope it wasn't a disappointment. Absolutely not, Baxter. I'm glad. Gratefully, Baxter gave you one final kiss. I feel the same way. That was lovely. And so are you. The brief, delightful office tryst came to a close. Baxter casually tipped back into the armrest of the couch, a smooth exit from the compromising position you'd both been in. He got to fastening the buttons of his collar again. Naturally, his fingers moved with grace and confidence. Seeing the way he got redressed was equally as attractive as the undoing. Then Baxter downed the rest of his drink in a single gulp. It was a meager treatment for cooling off, but would have to do. He exhaled through his nose before nonchalantly tossing the cup into a nearby trash bin.
Now,
I suppose we should leave. If we wait too much longer, we might be caught in here when operating hours begin. Baxter's still brazen but more publicly appropriate smirk made an appearance. I think they would also manage to figure out what this was about. Probably. Let's not do that. Yep, that'd be awkward. He brought you down the same path. Baxter and you turned the lights off as you went along. Once you reached the parking lot, you waited for Baxter to lock the building. Goosebumps lingered on your skin from the rush of adventure. After days stimulated enough to rival the wedding itself, you and Baxter were finally returned home. Well, I must thank you for a truly, and I mean truly, incredible time, Jules. I'll keep you only for a moment longer. Your drooping eyes lifted. He had more up his sleeve? Huh? Why? The sign of interest was awfully encouraging for Baxter. His mouth pulled too wide to be considered purely polite.
you know.
There is something to consider. On the one hand, I do have a pleasant, fully furnished guest room. It's sensible to make use of it. But on the other, Baxter literally lifted a hand up in your general direction. Naturally, the motion was completely nonchalant. Nothing unusual happening here. The master bedroom is frankly superior. I would say it'd be impolite to not even offer the space to my partner. You narrowed your gaze again, but it wasn't out of sleepiness. That proposition required a sufficiently lidded look. You're asking me to spend the night with you.
Oh, yes.
Exactly. Have considered you. Okay. Though you took a minute to explain more about your sexuality and boundaries before anything might be assumed, you took it all perfectly well. Baxter's coy smile split open into a giddy grin, like cracking a stone to see a beautiful geode inside.
Perfect.
Then feel free to join me after you've changed. I'll be waiting. Thanks. See you in a minute. Briefly, the two of you parted ways. You got ready to sleep as quickly as you could with your tired bones resisting the effort of even changing clothes. After you won the battle against zippers and buttons, you gathered a few necessities to migrate over to your new room. You'd left the door mostly open, so you went through it without knocking. Being there definitely felt different than your first. Passively piled onto a side table. Yeah, he hasn't had a chance to put everything away yet. There you are. Welcome. Hi. So, is that from the morning of the wedding? That was the last time you got to enter Baxter's room. Yes. There was no hesitation. You snorted at how straightforward he was. Most of the time. With certain things. I'll get to reorganizing another day, after you leave. Or perhaps I'll be inspired to do it before then, if I have the time. We'll see. Admitted. Of course, usually I wouldn't show my room in such a state this early in a relationship, or ever, really, but you've already seen far worse from me. Including being there to witness me making this very mess. Baxter busied himself by turning down the blankets for both of you. It's 5 years too late for me to fool you into thinking I'm flawlessly put together, and I want you to stay with me tonight. And I wanted you to stay with me. Pop. that squished in around your head when you lay fluffy pillow too. He had to inch from the center of the puff ball to the edge so he could see better. You turned on your side to face him. Baxter's sighing breath was nearer enough to flutter your ashes. As tempting as it is to stay up for the remaining half of the night, I know we shouldn't. Rest is important, and very needed today in particular.
Good night.
You too, Baxter. He had a convenient switch he could hit from the bed to shut off all the lights in the room. But there was still one piece missing before Baxter was officially settled in. He felt his arms wrapping around you. He was careful to have the touch be affectionate, soothing, rather than something that might make the whole get some sleep thing more difficult. Then Baxter whispered one last thought. I'm glad you were here. I never want to be anywhere else. Then, goodnight kiss on the lips. Just something small. It wasn't long properly leading into, but he was too darling not to peck. Ah, how lovely. Baxter murmured against her air and dreamy bliss. As incredible, as outright unbelievable as it was to be in Baxter's embrace for the night, the thrill you had couldn't compare to the comfort it brought you. You had gone through so much to be where you were. For years, you thought anything like it would never happen. You might not have given up if it would come to anything. Now that it was okay for you and for him, you could relax in a wholly complete sense. Baxter felt the same relief. Neither of you needed further words of reassurance. The warmth between you was enough. Your half-conscious mind swam through a moving the current day and the tower wedding planning excursion. The mental water was warm, relaxing. The cast one more glass the man you were in bed with before your eyes could no longer stay open. Putting on a fantastic event for Jude and Scott, seeing friends and family, starting a new relationship, that boyfriend being Baxter Ward. Even though your time in Prison Vista and everywhere beyond and in between would come to an end soon, it could not possibly have gone better. Without even realizing it, you drifted into pleasant dreams. Then when morning arrived, you saw him there. He hadn't vanished. He didn't leave you behind. Baxter remained fast asleep beside you, exactly as you knew he would be. The sheets surrounding you were full of the spiced floral scent Baxter wore as cologne. It was so classy, a perfect match to his normal demeanor, the public-facing part of him. Here, something that sharp didn't fit at all. Baxter was entirely graceless when he slept, with his face crushed in the pillow and his hair having lost its characteristic swoop. No one was a flawless person of poise. It was intentional and took effort. Morning Baxter was always a good reminder of that. You could write a list of your frustrations with Baxter Ward, secretly being kind of a mess was not on it. You liked that about him. Right then you were able to look at every little feature out of his up close. His sharp manicured eyebrows and equally pointed nose, the mole on his neck of course, and at the tippy top of his head, as he squinted in the sunshine, you could see a gradient in the strands, slighter at the roots than the rest of his hair. In the smallest of ways, Baxter had let you see his natural color. It was beautiful. You gently stroked his head. He smiled in his sleep, and when his deep brown eyes did flutter open, he continued to do so. But before saying anything, he yawned and stretched, and rubbed a thin line of drool from his mouth. Baxter also made a valiant attempt to straighten out his bed head. Only then did he determine it was appropriate to greet you.
Nice to see you.
Hello, Jules. How nice it is to see you again. Another wonderful day, Yes, it is. Good morning, Baxter. Despite officially being awake now, Baxter cozied up into you again. His hands reestablished the hold they had on you before he attempted to clean up. It was too adorable to do anything about. Besides, you weren't planning on getting up when you normally did either. You'd had many early days rushing about, and tomorrow would be another. That's when you would need to leave. Today, in that moment, you could both afford to linger in bed. So you snuggled against your boyfriend in return. With contented kisses and scattered whispers, Baxter indulged in having you completely to himself. Eventually, though, he decided to bring the lazing about from the bed to the living room. Not even Baxter wanted to spend an entire day lounging in his room, and it was past the hours he shunned. As you got to your still slightly achy feet, you caught another glimpse of the picture frame sitting pretty on one shelf. Unaware of what had captured your attention, Baxter got on his zebra print slippers and shuffled off ahead of you. You ambled into the living room after him, still in your PJs with phone in hand, just in case anyone reached out before you bothered to dress. This was your last full day in town, so odds were high someone would call or text any minute. Still thinking of the souvenir, you watched as Baxter slowly curled up on his preferred chair, the blue one tilted towards the windows. You took a spot on the couch. You still have the picture frame?
Oh.
You noticed. His usually pale cheeks flushed with color. It stood out even more starkly than usual, considering his outfit was almost pure white. Yes? Baxter explained himself with a flippant gesture of his hands, controlling his body more smoothly than he could his emotions. I am fond of it, even now. I've never been able to part with it. But isn't that what souvenirs are for? Keeping for the long term? Being entirely unreasonable for holding on to that after thoroughly leaving everything in Sunset Berg behind. He was entirely too aware of how ridiculous he sounded. Baxter had attempted using humor to overcome the hurdle of sentimentality. You're right, that's what I'd hoped you'd do. I just didn't think you would. Well, I'm sorry I made you feel that. Casually, you glanced down at your phone. There's a little conscious thought to it. In the back of your mind, you might have been motivated to see the time or check for messages. Nothing of much importance. There was a new notification. It stopped you in your tracks. Your eyes remained stuck to the device long enough for Baxter to ask if something was the matter. No, nothing was wrong. Not wrong at all. What had so completely captured your attention was that Baxter had been added to your group chat with Terry, Miranda, and Cove. Ah! Yes! It felt unreal. Only a week ago, Baxter was someone from the distant past, someone you were never meant to see again, and now there was his name in a friend chat. You had started dating him, but that addition was what fully let the situation sink in. Acceptance into your circle, a mundane yet crucial presence in your special social space. Baxter was truly a part of your life again. Jules? He prompted you for a response again, now concerned. Sorry, it's fine. Check your phone. Baxter did so. He gathered the phone that matched his pajamas and color scheme and gave it a curious look. Oh! That was all he could mutter. Baxter drew the screen closer towards his face. He stared at the notification as hard as you imagined you'd done just seconds ago. You'd been so distracted by the initial revelation that you weren't even sure what the message said. The words hadn't penetrated your head. Trying again, you scanned your most recent text. It started with an exuberant declaration from Terry. Hey, buds, we gotta get together today. Let's start in the evening. Everyone should be free then. Sure. You shook off the reverie, still slowing down, and reacted to the conversation. Hey, Baxter, do you think we could invite Xavier?
Oh, yes.
Interesting, but that's up to you and the others more than me. I'll agree with whatever you prefer. Alright, I guess I'll ask. Would anyone mind if I asked if someone else to come? Xavier, they're Baxter's friend. They made the wedding cake. Do it! Ooh, I'd want to meet them. Cool.
In that case...
I'll text them. Thanks. You'd been counting on that. You didn't have Xavier's number. Baxter busied himself with that new task while more messages popped in the group chat. Miranda had another suggestion. We should meet at Jude and Scott's place. It's bigger and they're not using it. Yeah, they already said Jules could be there. They can't stop us now. I don't know where that is. To others, that might read as disinterest or perhaps a complaint, but you could gauge the real worry that prompted his message. You're not going to be the one driving. We'll pick you up. Okay. Great. In your peripheral vision, you noticed motion. Baxter's fingers were still tapping away. He should have finished his invite to Xavier by now. That meant he was going to join the chat. We will see you this evening then. I'm looking forward to it. Very typical of Mr. Ward, though the exclamation mark was a bit festive. But then he signed the blase text off with the, most sincerely, your friend, Baxter Ward. Your phone lit up immediately as if the device itself was chuckling. Terry LOL'd repeatedly. Cole could only think of commenting, what? Miranda didn't even have a reply. Most likely she was laughing in real life. One last reply. Barely. LOL. He probably looked over to the man himself, chuckling Baxter's face into the road gulch the digital bomb he dropped on the unsuspecting group chat, and he placed his weapon down on the coffee table. His legs were crossed as he leaned comfortably into his boxy blue chair.
To be honest...
I'd like to admit something, Jules. I had your number all along. Of course, I never looked at it over the years we were apart, but didn't have it in me to delete it either. What? The memory of that first day flashed when Baxter offered you a business card so you could contact him for professional purposes only and ask for yours in return. When he refused to answer your accusation that he already should have your number. How strange. The bitter hurt feelings of that moment were so easy to remember, yet felt entirely separate from yourself. You have the hindsight to see how, even then, it was obvious, inevitable, that you and Baxter wouldn't stay on bad terms for long. He was a softie who longed for your approval, certainly not a stranger who truly didn't want anything to do with you. and there was no real chance he had deleted the number you'd given him. Baxter continued his story after kindly giving me the space to digest what he said. Recently, I found myself scrolling through our text history. So I saw those messages you sent after I was gone. I'm sorry, Jules. Thank you for saying that. I read over our text after meeting you again, too.
I understand.
Incredible. We can't help ourselves, At least the feeling is mutual. It was nice to see those old conversations. Yeah. Both you and Baxter were taken in by feelings of sentimentality, speaking softly, enjoying the gentle warmth of shared memories. Till's features twisted wryly. The tale wasn't quite over. However, it would have been far more pleasant if only I hadn't been reminded of how I texted as a 19-year-old. Baxter placed a hand across his eyes woefully. I said sincerely your friend in a text wholly sincerely. How I had the nerve to view myself as someone without any social awkwardness I will never know. Don't worry, the statement was far more self-aware this time. It was hilarious. Thank you. Baxter's signature smirk wasn't missing from his face for long. Perhaps I sent to add a little flair to my written statements. But it was considerate of your friends to add me to the group. That's where you belong. Baxter smiled at you brilliantly.
It's settled.
After eating plans were set, the two of you chatted in the kitchen and prepared a meal. Baxter got to prove once and for all that even if he couldn't bake, he could cook. Oh gosh, I want to keep going, but it's been 3 hours and my voice is fading. So, next week will probably be very short. Oh. I really want to keep going. It's just... make myself stop. Okay. Menu. Instead of going back. There we go. Okay, so... next week, we will come back to this. Probably finished then. I don't know about after. And I don't know about Wednesday. I meant to stream last Wednesday, but the hot heat was so intense, I just wanted to sit in front of my fan. So, anyway, I'll see you next time. We will definitely finish this next time, I'm sure of it. So, it's longer than I thought it would be. Jesus. I was like, it's just the wedding left, right? Nope, way more than the wedding. But anyway, thank you everyone for joining me, and I hope you have a good rest of the day, whenever it is. Bye.